Chapter 1461 Soul Ancestor, The Rise of the Human Race. Soul Tao, which specializes in cultivating the soul, but doesn't pay attention to the physical body. This path is not perfect. However, in the future, I can combine the soul Tao and the body Tao to create a more perfect path. Yi Tian thought to himself. Therefore, he is going to use this replica body to walk the soul path. Through understanding, the current soul path of this dark soul domain has developed to the level of the soul ancestor, and the soul ancestor is equivalent to the domain ancestor realm. The cultivation of the soul ancestor is also through the transformation of the soul again and again, and the soul ancestor who has just been promoted has a soul strength comparable to that of the supreme power domain ancestor. Otherwise, there is no way to rely on the power of the soul to be comparable to the fighting power of the ancestors of the domain. In the following days, some human races began to follow the soul path, but some human races still followed the previous way of cultivation. However, they found that it was difficult to improve their cultivation here by following the previous way of cultivation, and even trying to hit the realm of the ancestors was like a moat. As a result, the half-step domain ancestors of the human race gave up the road of domain ancestors and began to walk the road of soul ancestors. But soon, Yi Tian discovered a problem, that is, their souls were too weak to become soul ancestors. This time, not only the half-step ancestors of the human race were stunned, but even the supreme half-step ancestors of other forces were also stunned. If you can't become a soul ancestor, how can you get more opportunities in the future, and how can you fight with the local soul masters of the dark soul realm? Today, there are also many half-step soul ancestors in the dark soul realm. Although their strength is not strong, they can be numerous in number. Once these half-step soul ancestors are promoted to the soul ancestor realm, but they can't become soul ancestors, they will not be able to beat them, let alone occupy this place in the future. We must create a cultivation technique, rebuild the soul path, transform the body of the half-step ancestor of the human race, and become a half-step soul ancestor. Yi Tian decided. This step is very difficult, and it can even be said to be like a moat. But at this time, Yi Tian discovered that the half-step domain ancestors of many forces came out of the dark soul domain, bringing out a large number of soul path exercises. So, Yi Tian also let the cloned body come out from the dark soul realm. Afterwards, Yi Tian released the duplicate body, started duplicating the main body, and then began to use the derivation characteristics to deduce the exercises again and again. To deduce the exercises by consuming holy souls, this kind of efficiency can be many times faster than the ancestors. The duplicated body collapsed again and again, duplicated the body again, and evolved again. In this way, the years passed, and millions of years passed in a blink of an eye. And in these millions of years, the ancestors have been deducing the exercises, thus realizing the transformation of half-step domain ancestors into half-step soul ancestors. When the other ancestors had not completed the transformation of the cultivation technique, Yi Tian relied on countless derivations to finally create a cultivation technique, melting soul technique. The so-called fusion soul technique is to transform the power of the half-step ancestor into the power of the soul, thereby realizing the qualitative change of the soul, stepping into the realm of the half-step soul ancestor, and embarking on the soul path in one fell swoop. And Yi Tian has only created the fusion soul technique of the half-step domain ancestor level, and has not created the fusion soul technique of the domain ancestor level, so it is only suitable for the half-step domain ancestor. After Yi Tian created the fusion soul technique, he copied the original half-step domain ancestor body again, and returned this body to the dark soul domain. After returning to the dark soul realm, Yi Tian summoned 100,000 geniuses as the leader of 100,000 geniuses. In these millions of years, the geniuses of the 100,000 people have not made any progress in their cultivation, and some have fallen, but they have also obtained a lot of resources and treasures. Unfortunately, there is no way to improve their cultivation, and they cannot use these resources and treasures. Wanfa Zanzu has created a practice that can make us half-step soul ancestors, but everyone must make an oath and must not try to leak this practice, because other forces do not have such a practice. Once it is leaked now, the advantage of our human race will be gone. Yi Tian ordered. Yes, one after another, the geniuses made oaths, and it was the most serious and harshest oath of life, and only then did they obtain the inheritance of the fusion soul technique. With the soul fusion technique, the geniuses of the human race transformed into half-step soul ancestors one by one, and then used the acquired resources and soul treasures to enter the realm of soul ancestors one after another. After 100,000 years, all the geniuses of the human race have entered the realm of soul ancestors. At this time, they can't go out, otherwise once they leave the dark soul realm, they can't come in. After becoming the sole ancestor, the geniuses of the human race began to expand their territory, and even establish the power of the temple, recruiting local residents of the Dark Soul realm, and constantly expanding their influence. With the territory and more resources, the strength of the human race ancestors increased very quickly. Only a few million years have passed, all the human ancestors have been promoted to the top soul ancestor combat power, and Yitian's cultivation base has improved the fastest, and has been promoted to the realm of the strongest soul ancestor. The way of the soul ancestor and the way of the domain ancestor seem to be different, but there are still similarities. In addition, Yitian is the peak of the supreme domain ancestor, so it is not difficult to reverse the way of the soul ancestor, at least in the supreme soul ancestor. Before the realm, it is not difficult. In addition, Yitian also created several holy skills suitable for the ancestors to use, and also created a bunch of soul skills at the ancestor level, which is enough for the ancestors of the clan to cultivate. Dark Soul Domain, Temple Headquarters. As the master of the temple, Yitian called the human ancestors. Everyone, it's time for us to occupy a wider area. This is a remote area of a euro the Dark Soul realm, and now with the strength of our human race, there is no problem even occupying the core area. I plan to occupy the Dark Soul realm. A holy world. Yitian planned. Holy realm. Everyone was excited when they heard this plan. Even the Daoshan realm has only one holy realm, Xuanshu Holy Realm, and they are about to capture a holy realm in the Dark Soul realm. If they succeed, the human race will be equivalent to 2 holy realms. Then, they began to plan which holy world to attack. At present, the Dark Soul realm has dozens of holy realms, and each holy realm is occupied by a large number of forces, and no one has the ownership of the entire holy realm. Because it is too difficult to completely occupy a Saint Wang Qianjiao world. Just capture the holy world of the 10 directions. Yitian pointed to a holy world on the map, Dao. There are many forces in the holy world of the 10 directions. After investigation by the human race, most of these forces belong to some races in the dark destruction domain. There are only a small number of human races left in the temple, but there are still many native soul ancestors. These soul ancestors joined the temple when they were very weak. After all, they were all cultivated by the temple, and naturally they would not betray the temple. Moreover, the human race did not do anything excessive, only those forces like the dark destruction domain would aim to destroy everything, so they would be hostile, and even resisted by the dark sanctuary at first. Yitian took tens of thousands of top soul ancestors and crossed a long distance. It took several months to reach the core area of the Dark Soul realm and to the front of the 10 Directions Holy Realm. Chapter 1462 Occupy the Holy World of 10 Directions. In front of the Holy Realm of the 10 Directions. Yitian led the human race to descend and directly entered the holy world of the 10 directions. From today, the holy worlds of the 10 directions belong to our human race. Yitian's voice permeated the entire 10 direction holy world. Such an arrogant declaration immediately angered many forces in the holy world of the 10 directions. The holy worlds of the 10 directions will destroy Longshan. This is the territory that the geniuses of the Long Evil Clan, one of the 3,000 evil clans in the Dark Sanctuary, conquered. The Long Evil Clan ranks in a very good position among the 3,000 Evil Clan, with 3 supreme level domain ancestors and a number of invincible domain ancestors. At this time, Ji Luolu, the genius leader of the Dragon Evil Clan, looked in the direction of the human race through the layers of void. At this time, the major forces in the entire Dark Sanctuary have long since possessed the technique of transforming into half-step soul ancestors, and now after the Dragon Evil Clan has been transformed into half-step soul ancestors, they have also been promoted to soul ancestors. Moreover, there are a lot of resources in the holy world of the 10 directions, coupled with the strong support of the Long Evil Clan. They have fully cultivated the ancient Luolu, thus raising the ancient Luolu's cultivation to the level of the strongest soul ancestor. Among the holy worlds of the 10 directions, his ancient Luolu's strength was enough to rank in the top 10. As the human race, the race of the ancestors of Wanfa, Ji Luolu said coldly, the strength of the ancestors of Wanfa is indeed very strong, comparable to the half-step ancestor, but the human race has only given birth to a warrior of Wanfa. Ancestor, everyone else is ants, and a group of human races dare to claim to occupy the holy worlds of the 10 directions, how arrogant. Now, his Dragon Evil Clan also occupied an area in the holy realm of the 10 directions, trained a large number of subordinates, and was extremely powerful. Listen to my orders, kill the family. Ji Luolu ordered. Boom, a soul ancestor was dispatched, and a large number of half-step soul ancestors were also mobilized, killing the human race. This time, the human race angered the forces of the entire holy world of the 10 directions, and many forces came to kill them, vowing to kill the human race. Coming, Yi Tian sensed the arrival of a large number of soul ancestors, and the terrifying tide of soul energy came. Compared with so many soul ancestors, the number of human races is indeed not enough. However, the soul ancestors of the human race are all top soul ancestors, and with Yi Tian, an almost invincible supreme soul ancestor, ordinary supreme soul ancestors are like CJFI ants in his eyes. The first to arrive was the Dragon Evil clan. Kill them. Ji Luolu ordered. As one of the evil races, they don't know what it means to threaten greed, and they will kill when they encounter it, without any nonsense. Kill. Yi Tian gave an order, and the top soul ancestors of the human race shot together. In this fight, Ji Luolu was stunned. It's all top soul ancestors, how could this be? Why is the human race progressing so fast? Ji Luolu did not dare to believe. As soon as the two sides collided, the soul ancestors of the Long Evil clan were bombarded and killed. Ji Luolu didn't dare to fight against so many top soul ancestors of the human race. A supreme soul ancestor like him is not very powerful. After all, the training time is short, but his cultivation base has reached the level of the Supreme Soul Ancestor, and even the soul skills at the Soul Ancestor level are not strong. If you don't have a few, the combat power is only comparable to that of the average superpower ancestors, but there is no way to fight against tens of thousands of top soul ancestors by yourself. Unexpected, Yi Tian shot, and a spear of soul pierced instantly. Puff! Ji Luolu was instantly killed by a single blow, and he didn't even have the power to resist. Soon, the evil dragon clan was destroyed. Subsequently, one force encountered the human race. Yi Tian led the human race to annihilate the forces one by one, almost sweeping the holy worlds of the 10 directions. In the end, dozens of supreme ancestors from the 10-party holy world united and prepared to attack and kill Yi Tian. As a result, Yi Tian killed these dozens of supreme soul ancestors in an instant. Decades later, the human race unified the holy worlds of the 10 directions and completely occupied the holy worlds of the 10 directions. Outside the Dark Soul realm, the supreme-level ancestors of the Longxi clan already knew that the geniuses of the Longxi clan had been wiped out by the human race, and they were immediately annoyed. But they didn't dare to get angry. After all, their strength was very weak, far inferior to Yi Tian. How could they be qualified to get angry at Yi Tian? However, the human race occupied the holy world of the 10 directions, which attracted the attention of the ancestors. After all, the Dark Soul realm only has dozens of holy realms now. If the War Gate occupies a holy realm, it is relatively normal. But now, it is just a human race, occupying a holy world alone, which is too shocking. Especially when they learned that a supreme soul ancestor swept everything and was unstoppable, they suspected that the human race had cheated. But no matter how they investigated, they couldn't find any problems. In the future, focus on the human race. The Dark Sanctuary and the ancestors of the Eternal Sect issued this order one after another. The other holy gates of the Dark Sanctuary have also begun to pay attention to the human race. After all, the human race occupies a holy world, and the future development speed must be very fast, which is a big problem. After the human race occupied the holy world of the 10 directions, Yi Tian gathered a lot of resources and continued to promote the cultivation of the soul ancestor. In a flash, 100 million years have passed since the human race entered the Dark Soul realm. At this time, the Dark Soul realm ushered in the second transformation, and at this time, the domain ancestors below the strongest domain ancestors were allowed to enter. A large number of top domain ancestors entered, and many of them were at the level of holy sons, who could leapfrog to kill ordinary supreme domain ancestors, and there were even saints. When these top domain ancestors entered the soul ancestor, it was naturally impossible to follow the path of the soul ancestor, and the first ancestors could not deduce the cultivation method to make the domain ancestor become the soul ancestor. These top domain ancestors have full confidence to enter the realm of the strongest domain ancestors. Even if it is difficult to follow the path of the domain ancestors in the Dark Soul domain, they still have the hope of breaking the shackles and being promoted to the strongest domain ancestors. Once they are promoted to the strongest ancestors, their strength will be very powerful, even crushing the strongest ancestors of the Dark Soul domain. In this way, the pattern of the Dark Soul realm will change, and the power turf will also change. For example, some forces such as the Longxi clan have dispatched a large number of top domain ancestors. The Longxi clan also dispatched a saint who was the descendant of Baigui Zaizu, one of the 3 supreme domain ancestors of the Longxi clan. The Scorpio Holy Sun is very powerful. Once he enters the Dark Soul realm, he can immediately hit the realm of the Strong Realm Ancestor. Once the Scorpio Holy Sun stepped into the Supreme Strong Domain Ancestor, I don't know how many times stronger than the average Supreme Strong Domain Ancestor. Coupled with the resources of the Dragon Evil race, the strength will be improved again. At that time, they will launch an attack on the human race in the holy world of the 10 directions. Chapter 1463. The 3 major evil tribes have been wiped out. Like other forces, Yi Tian also dispatched a lot of the top domain ancestors of the human race to the Dark Soul realm, but due to the issue of quota, he could only send 30,000 top domain ancestors. Once these 30,000 top domain ancestors enter the Dark Soul domain, about a small part will be able to break through to the realm of the strongest domain ancestors. In this way, it can also increase the strength of the 10 Fang sacred world human race, and can also relieve some of Yi Tian's pressure. After these top domain ancestors poured into the Dark Soul domain, they did not fight each other, but they encountered local forces. After all, the local forces have also risen now, and they have local advantages. They are taken care of by the luck of the Dark Soul realm, making it easier to cultivate, and there are also many evil spirits born in them, which are not weaker than the Dark Sanctuary and the Dark Destruction realm, the domain ancestors of the Eternal Sect. After a fight, neither of the two sides could do anything about the other, so let it go. But after these top domain ancestors break through to the strongest domain ancestors, the Dark Soul domain will attract a new round of battle. In the blink of an eye, another tens of millions of years have passed. At this time, the first batch of Xian, Yuzu was born. Outside the holy realm of the 10 directions, a group of critic domain ancestors and soul ancestors came here. Among them are 3 evil clan saints, one of them is the Scorpio Holy Sun, and the other 2 are from the Demon Clan, and the Dream Clan. The top domain ancestors who can enter the Dark Soul domain to lead the 3 clans, their strength can be imagined how powerful, they must be far superior to ordinary people, even among the saints, they belong to the top ranks. Today, their 3 major saints have stepped into the ranks of the ancestors of the strongest domain, and even under the treasures bestowed by the ancestors, they have forcibly upgraded their cultivation base to the peak realm of the ancestors of the strong domain in the Dark Soul domain. Of course, if they want to condense the holy light of the soul, and then condense the holy soul, they want a long time. If you don't care about the foundation problem, you can forcibly hit the realm of the invincible ancestors, and the ancestors also have a way. However, it is useless to fight for a while, even if a few invincible ancestors are born, there is no way to change anything. Moreover, none of the saints were willing to waste their talents, self-destructing their foundation and forcibly breaking through the invincible domain ancestors. This time, the son of Scorpion, that is, the Scorpion domain ancestor and other 3 saints, led tens of thousands of the strongest domain ancestors, and came to the holy world of the 10 directions, just to clean up the human race and occupy the holy world of the 10 directions. This is also the ancestors. One of the orders given to them. Evil Wind domain ancestor, Mingying domain ancestor, we will attack and kill the leader of the famous clan in the 10 directions holy realm, Qingye soul ancestor, and try to kill him instantly. Scorpion domain ancestor suggested, no problem, this is just a very simple matter. The Qingye soul ancestor was only a half-step ancestor and came to the Dark Soul realm. Although his cultivation has improved rapidly, he is now the strongest soul ancestor, but his cultivation time was short. There is no cultivation base, but it is estimated that he has not mastered a few powerful soul skills, even if he is a saint, but it is estimated that he has not mastered even a sacred skill of the perfect state. Moreover, Soul Ancestor used the sacred skills of the Dark Sanctuary to greatly reduce the power, and there are probably not many sacred skills suitable for Soul Ancestor, and it is too late to learn now. And our 3 major saints have mastered 2 perfection sacred skills, killing a Supreme Soul Ancestor is naturally very simple. The ancestor of the Eagle domain was full of self-confidence. Be careful, this is an order from the ancestor. Scorpion domain ancestor reminded. Mingying domain ancestor and Qingye soul ancestor nodded, and immediately took many supreme domain ancestors and a large number of top domain ancestors to kill the holy world of the 10 directions. With their strength, it is enough to crush the past. Master Qingye soul ancestor, a large number of supreme power ancestors have killed our 10 direction holy world. A human race supreme ancestor reported to Yi Tian. Qingye Yuzu is the identity of this duplicate body, no one knows that this is Yi Tian's duplicate body, not even the human race. Moreover, Yi Tian's current method is completely new, so no one can guess. Let them enter the Shifang sacred realm, and then you will urge the Shifang sacred realm's great formation, and no one will be allowed to escape. Yi Tian ordered. Lord Qingye Soul Ancestor, there are too many people on the other side, I'm worried. The supreme ancestor of the human race obviously did not know Yi Tian's strength, so he was worried. Don't worry, I can kill them all, you can help. Yi Tian said lightly. Yes. The Xian domain ancestor nodded. The strongest domain ancestors and the top domain ancestors of the three evil races easily entered the holy world of the 10 directions, and immediately rushed towards the human race base camp. Boom! The 10 directions sacred realm was blocked, and a celebrity clan supreme ancestor appeared. And Yi Tian stood at the forefront, staring directly at the ancestors of the 3 major evil clans. The 2 sides did not speak, and they fought directly. Kill, Scorpion Domain Ancestor, Mingying Domain Ancestor, and Evil Wind Domain Ancestor. 3 sages found Yi Tian at the first time. Boom! The 3 perfection holy skills were displayed, blocking Yi Tian's emptiness in all directions. Ask for flowers. Be careful of Qingye Soul Ancestor, these are 3 saints. The other supreme ancestors of the human race were worried. However, Yi Tian smiled coldly, the 3 saints are just ants. I saw Yi Tian waved his hand, and countless golden threads of soul appeared. Holy skill, soul gold thread. This is not the golden thread of the soul of the perfect realm, but the golden thread of the soul of the extreme realm. Moreover, the soul gold thread saint skill created by Yi Tian is the most top-notch saint skill, very close to the ancestral skill. However, Yi Tian has not yet created the soul gold thread of the ancestral skill level. After all, it is not good if it is too high profile. Otherwise, Yi Tian has cultivated a lot of accomplishments in the ancestral skill of the perfect realm, and advancing the soul gold thread to the ancestral skill level will also be difficult. Not difficult. Puff puff. The 3 saints were cut apart, and their 3 major holy skill attacks landed on Yi Tian's body, blocked by Yi Tian's aura holy armor, and failed to hurt Yi Tian. And the holy skill of spiritual light sacred armor was also cultivated to the limit by Yi Tian. No, how is it possible for the holy skills of the extreme realm? How can the human race still have such a monstrous saint? Could it be that he is the descendant of the ancestors of Wanfa? But they felt something was wrong. The Wanfa Zanzu did have descendants, but they were the descendants born before he became the ancestor of the supreme territory, and they were not the Qingye soul ancestor. Although there are treasures that give birth to holy gifts in the dark forbidden area, it is too rare, and there is absolutely no real holy gifted evildoer created by the holy gifted person. It took only 100 million years for the Qingye soul ancestor to become the soul ancestor, so why is so much time enough? Could it be that Qingye Yuzu mastered the holy skills of the extreme realm when he was a half-step Yuzu ancestor? This is absolutely impossible, the dark forbidden area has never been born with such a monster. Then there is only one possibility, that is, Qingye soul ancestor found a treasure in the dark soul realm that can quickly assist in comprehending holy skills, which allowed him to raise the holy skills to the limit in a short period of time. Now, the Scorpion domain ancestors regretted it very much, but it was too late. Puff puff, under the golden thread of their souls, their 3 great saints could not resist at all. In a short while, they were beheaded by Yi Tian. Subsequently, Yi Tian swept the 3 major evil clan armies by himself, and a large number of the strongest domain ancestors and the top domain ancestors were killed by him alone. Some of the strongest domain ancestors and the top domain ancestors wanted to escape, but they were trapped by the human race to the strong domain ancestors and the Great Formation, and none of them escaped. So far, the 3 major evil clan armies have all fallen. Chapter 1464 Supreme Soul Ancestor, a bold idea. The 3 saints of Scorpion Domain Ancestor, Mingying Domain Ancestor and Evil Wind Domain Ancestor fell, and their parents knew immediately. This time, the 3 evil clans in the Dark Destruction Domain were furious. Through deduction, they all know that the ancestors who sent into the Dark Soul Domain have all fallen, and they have hardly played any role, so they fell and died. This is a huge loss. Moreover, the loss of 3 holy endowments made them almost unbearable. More importantly, all the clansmen they dispatched have fallen, which is equivalent to a complete failure, and the benefits of the Dark Soul Realm have nothing to do with them. After a trillion years, it was their turn to enter the Dark Soul Realm. And during this time, they couldn't get any benefit from the Dark Soul Realm. This is the real loss. After Yi Tian, 687, destroyed the 3 evil clan ancestors in the Dark Sanctuary, he continued to consolidate the territory of the human race. Once a precious treasure is born somewhere, he will go to snatch it. In this way, the long years passed slowly. Under the leadership of Yi Tian, the human race grew stronger and stronger in the Dark Soul realm, grabbing many treasures, some of which were even useful to the Supreme Domain Ancestor. Some of these treasures obtained by the human race were used for themselves, and some were taken out of the Dark Soul domain and sent to the human race headquarters in the Xuanshu Holy World. It can be said that with the resources of the Dark Soul domain, the strength of the human race has developed very quickly. In the blink of an eye, tens of billions of years have passed. At this time, Yi Tian's cloned body in the Dark Soul realm had grown to the Invincible Soul Ancestor realm, and had reached the peak realm of the Invincible Soul Ancestor. Invincible Soul Ancestor is promoted to Supreme Soul Ancestor, and this path has also been deduced. The Invincible Domain Ancestor was promoted to the Supreme Domain Ancestor to master the physical body. After completing 9 transformations, he entered the realm of the Supreme Domain Ancestor, and the Invincible Soul Ancestor was similar. The Invincible Soul Ancestor is to control the soul. After controlling 365 times the power of the soul, it will undergo 9 soul transformations, and at that time, it will be able to enter the realm of the Supreme Soul Ancestor. At present, there are many experts in the Dark Soul realm who have reached the Invincible Soul Ancestor, and most of them are local soul ancestors, because the local soul ancestors are favored by luck, and their cultivation is very smooth, while outsiders are subject to certain suppression. Yi Tian's cloned body has also cultivated to the peak state of the Invincible Soul Ancestor, and is beginning to control the soul. Although controlling the soul is not the same as controlling the physical body, Yi Tian's realm is too high after all, coupled with the occasional use of derivation characteristics, consuming a little of the power of the Holy Soul to deduce how to control the soul. This has little effect on the body. Therefore, Yi Tian's speed in controlling the soul can be many times faster than other Invincible Soul Ancestors. Although within 1 trillion years, the Supreme Ancestors will not be able to enter, and the First Ancestors will not be able to enter. However, Yi Tian wanted to raise his cultivation base to the peak state of the Supreme Soul Ancestor within 1 trillion years. In this way, even if other Supreme-level Ancestors entered the Dark Soul domain, there was still no way to compete with him. Moreover, Yi Tian knew that in 1 trillion years, a shocking opportunity would be born in the Dark Soul realm, and that was the time when the competition was the most intense. Today, the Dark Soul realm was initially born, and the grades of treasures born are limited. 100 million years, 100 million years, passed by like this. In the 70 billionth year, Yi Tian finally completed 9 soul transformations and entered the Supreme Soul Ancestor realm. Boom! Endless soul energy poured into the holy world of the 10 directions from the Dark Soul realm, and was absorbed and refined by Yi Tian. The movement of his breakthrough was too great, thus attracting the attention of many powerhouses. Even the ancestors noticed the movement of Yi Tian's breakthrough. The ancestor of the Dark Soul domain was born, the ancestor of the Supreme Domain. So fast, who is it? The ancestors were curious. Soon, they knew. Human race, Qingye Soul Ancestor, it's him. The ancestors were stunned. In order to cultivate the Invincible Soul Ancestors, they even took out some treasures themselves, but the way of the Soul Ancestors is an unfamiliar road after all, and it is difficult for them to quickly help the Soul Ancestors to be promoted to the Supreme Soul Ancestors. But even so, with their resources and guidance, they are not a Soul Ancestor of the human race. What is the human race? It's just a Supreme Domain Ancestor. For them, this force is simply ants. But it is such a small force that has cultivated a terrifying genius that their younger generation and disciples cannot climb. After Yi Tian's cloned body entered the Supreme Domain Ancestor, he no longer cared about everything. Yi Tian, a euro as the Qingye Soul Ancestor, began to swept everything, stepped into the headquarters of each force, robbed all their resources, and even destroyed the Holy Clan and the Holy Gates of the Dark Sanctuary. They were also cared for by him. Of course, he will not kill everything indiscriminately. After all, the headquarters of the human race and the main body are in the outside world, so naturally they cannot offend these ancestors too much. Therefore, Yi Tian only grabs resources and does not kill people. In this way, many resources of the Dark Sanctuary were gathered into the hands of the Terran, and many treasures were also occupied by the Terran. Many forces united and wanted to fight against Yi Tian, a euro, but they still couldn't beat Yi Tian. Forget it, the real battlefield is only 1 trillion years after the birth of the Dark Soul realm. The treasures born at that time are really precious. What if these resources are now given to the people? It is difficult for the Qingye Soul Ancestor to return. After a mere 1 trillion years, can it grow to the level of competing with the peak powerhouses of the Supreme Domain Ancestors? The ancestors thought. The ancestors gave up the contest for a period of time, so in this era, the Dark Soul domain was dominated by the human race. Gathering the resources of the Dark Soul realm, Yi Tian cultivated all the soul ancestors of the human race to the invincible soul ancestor realm. However, it is still very difficult for them to be promoted to Supreme Soul Ancestor. However, with his guidance and preaching, when the time of 1 trillion years arrives, the human race should have the hope of giving birth to several Supreme Soul Ancestors. And 5.8 Yi Tian, a euro the cloned body, is also working hard as a cultivator, refining countless resources, just so that he can raise his strength to the peak of the Supreme Soul Ancestor. But this step is not easy. Time is not enough. A mere trillion years is indeed not a long time, and during this period of time, the Dark Soul realm can't produce the resources for the rapid progress of the Supreme Soul Ancestor's cultivation base, and the annihilation treasure in the body has also been refined. Now, without more annihilation treasures, there is no way to quickly improve the cultivation base. Yi Tian thought to himself. After much deliberation, day to day, the annihilation family was destroyed, but strictly speaking, I am also an annihilation family. After all, I have all the ancestors of the annihilation family, because if I want, I can also create an annihilation time and space area. Yi Tian suddenly thought. Chapter 1465 Create a time and space of annihilation, and break through the peak of the Supreme Soul. It is indeed a very bold idea to create a time and space of annihilation. If it is in the outside world, the ancestors can easily know, then he is in trouble. However, this is the Dark Soul realm, and now the ancestors cannot enter. Therefore, if he creates a time and space of annihilation in the Dark Soul realm, the first ancestor will never find it. Moreover, he does not need to create a large-scale silence time and space, but only needs to create a small silence time and space. As long as there is one annihilation clan in the annihilation time and space, it can continue to exist, and the annihilation ancestors of the annihilation clan can always affect the annihilation time and space. Of course, annihilation time and space also needs energy support. If it absorbs a large amount of energy from the outside world, it can be continuously transformed into annihilation energy, and annihilation energy has a huge effect on the Supreme Domain Ancestor and Supreme Soul Ancestor. However, the premise is that they can withstand the erosion of annihilation energy. Other Supreme Ancestors cannot withstand the erosion of annihilation energy. Only the ancestors can refine the annihilation energy. But Yi Tian can refine the annihilation energy. The Dark Soul realm has no shortage of resources. 29 I can completely create a small piece of quiet time and space, and then integrate a large amount of resources into the quiet time and space. At the beginning, the reason why the Quiet Clan invaded the Dark Forbidden Zone madly was to occupy a large amount of territory, devouring the energy resources of the Dark Forbidden area, transforming it into annihilation energy, thereby expanding the annihilation family. Yi Tian muttered. Therefore, for him now, all this is very easy to do, and there is no need to worry about being discovered by the ancestors. Anyway, those low-level resources are useless to him. It is better to use waste and convert them into annihilation energy. This is a way to quickly improve his cultivation. That's it, Yi Tian decided. Do it when you think of it. Yi Tian chose Shifang's sacred realm, and then blocked an area, not allowing anyone to come in, not even the invincible ancestors of the human race. Afterwards, he began to perform the ancestral Fu of silent destruction. This duplicate body was also given the ancestral endowment by the ontology, so it could affect the time and space here. Boom! A space-time area was invaded by the ancestral Fu, and a special space-time area was gradually formed. At the beginning, this space-time region was still small, but it gradually expanded to the size of a universe. Almost, such a large range is enough. The time and space of silence has been created, and it still needs to be stabilized, otherwise it will gradually disappear. In the days that followed, Yi Tian integrated massive resources into this annihilation time and space, and used annihilation ancestors to smelt these energies, increasing the power of this annihilation time and space. From the beginning, the annihilation energy of this annihilation time and space was extremely thin, but it gradually became richer. Even if there is no annihilation treasure, absorbing annihilation energy in this annihilation time and space is many times faster than outside cultivation. Under the accumulation of massive resources, this annihilation time and space finally gave birth to annihilation treasures. In a certain area of a euro time and space, a flower was born. Silent blood flower, a mid-grade silence treasure, a good harvest. Yi Tian waited for some years, and when the flower bloomed and grew, he picked it off. In the days that followed, one piece of one after another was born, and all fell into Yi Tian's hands, and no one snatched it from him. And the Dark Soul realm has been producing a lot of treasures, almost all of which have fallen into the hands of the human race, and most of the resources in the human race are concentrated on Yi Tian. Therefore, Yi Tian did not lack resources at all, and devoted all of them to the time and space of annihilation. With enough annihilation treasures, Yi Tian began to refine the annihilation treasures, tempering his soul, and improving his cultivation. After only tens of millions of years, Yi Tian's cultivation level has risen to the middle stage of the Supreme Soul Ancestor. In the blink of an eye, billions of years have passed in the Dark Soul realm. At this time, the Dark Soul realm still did not have a second Supreme Soul Ancestor, and Yi Tian's cultivation base had been raised to the peak state of the Supreme Soul Ancestor with the help of the Annihilation Treasure, which was consistent with the cultivation base of his body. Ha ha ha, I don't care about the foundation. If I become an ancestor casually, I really hope to become an ancestor within a realm year. Yi Tian thought to himself. And the ancestors want to enter the Dark Soul realm. I am afraid it will take 100 realm years. 100 realm years is not a long distance for the ancestors, which ancestor has not spent 1,000,000 realm years since cultivation. But for Yi Tian, a euro within 100 realms, no matter how trash he is, he has already become the ancestor. Of course, the main body pursues the most powerful ancestor, so it will not be in a hurry to break through. If you want to create the most powerful ancestor method, you will break through the ancestor. The next day is to deduce a batch of ancestral skills, cultivate the ancestral skills to the perfect state, and then start practicing the space ancestor method. Yi Tian decided, once he breaks through to the ancestor realm with the help of the space ancestor method, then he is the space ancestor, and he became the space ancestor in the Dark Soul realm. Even as a future person, he can control a small part of the power of the Dark Soul realm and exert powerful strength. However, after cultivating 100 years of realm, the strength will be stronger, and there is definitely hope to compete with the ancestors of destruction and the ancestors. Once they have the Dark Soul realm as their foundation, the strength of the human race will probably reach a terrifying level. Moreover, Xuanshu Holy Realm can definitely become comparable to a dark holy place in the future. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, 100 billion years have passed. At this time, hundreds of Supreme Soul ancestors have been born in the Dark Soul realm, most of them are local residents. After all, at the beginning of the birth of the Dark Soul realm, it is too easy for the local residents to cultivate, but it will be difficult to be born in the future. There are so many Supreme Soul ancestors, and this is also the welfare at the beginning of the birth of the Dark Holy Land. These Supreme Soul ancestors are all in the early stage, and if they want to be promoted to the middle stage, I am afraid that they can only wait for the big opportunity after 1,000,000,000,000 years. Moreover, in 1,000,000,000,000 years, many treasures will be born that will quickly enhance the strength of the Supreme Ancestors. However, what no one knows is that at this time Yi Tian has cultivated a large number of ancestor skills to the perfect state, and his cultivation base has reached the pinnacle of the Supreme Soul Ancestor, and even began to temper his physical body, wanting to achieve something in the physical body. However, this step is too difficult. Once you become the Supreme Soul Ancestor, the body will almost become soul energy, and there is no way to have such a terrifying body like the Supreme Domain Ancestor. But this is also quite normal. Because the upper domain has the spirit of Supreme Soul Ancestor 1, it is too difficult to combine the two completely. And in these 100 billion years, Yi Tian has also begun to comprehend the space ancestor law, and he has already comprehended 1/5 of it. Once he has waited for 1,000,000,000,000 years, he can absolutely comprehend the space ancestor law thoroughly, and he can step into the ancestor realm with a single thought. Then wait for 1,000,000,000,000 years to break through to the realm of the ancestors and shock those ancestors. Yi Tian said with a smile. Chapter 1466 The birth of the original ancestor world, about to hit the ancestors. 100 billion years, 100 billion years, have passed like this. Under the long years, the overall strength of the Dark Soul realm has grown rapidly, but the growth rate of the Supreme Soul Ancestor is getting slower and slower. In the future, it will be difficult for tens of billions of years to give birth to a Supreme Soul Ancestor, plus the Supreme Soul Ancestor. Soul ancestors were still fighting each other, and occasionally one or two Supreme Soul ancestors fell, causing the number of Supreme Soul ancestors in the Dark Soul domain to stabilize at a number, and occasionally drop one or two. With the help of an almost invincible Supreme Soul ancestor like Yi Tian, the human race has developed rapidly in strength and has sufficient resources. The human race has given birth to a large number of invincible domain ancestors, and even 10 supreme soul ancestors. This is an opportunity for the human race. But after 10 supreme soul ancestors were born, it would be difficult for the human race to give birth to more supreme soul ancestors, not only because of the end of the welfare of the dark soul domain, but also because of luck. From the same force, more than 10 supreme soul ancestors have been born, and it is very difficult to continue to be born. Of course, if there are enough resources and opportunities, more supreme soul ancestors can be born, but it will definitely be a long time. At this time, Yi Tian has already fully comprehended the space ancestor law, and he can step into the ancestor realm with the help of the space ancestor law at any time. Besides him, the most powerful supreme soul ancestor in the dark soul realm is a mid-stage supreme soul ancestor, and belongs to the resident of the body. He is far from Yi Tian's opponent, and is like an ant in Yi Tian's eyes. Come on, 1 trillion years are coming, and the dark soul realm will not be able to restrict the entry of the supreme ancestors, and the first ancestral realm will be born, and a large number of congenital things will be born, and it will be the ancestral realm. The innate thing. Moreover, the first ancestral realm born in the dark holy land is the primitive ancestral realm. The birth of the primitive ancestral realm will inevitably lead to the birth of the primitive ancestral spring. Immerse in the primitive ancestral spring, and the cultivation will improve rapidly, and even make know the body of the superior domain ancestor is tempered again for the second time, which is a real big opportunity. Yi Tian muttered. At that time, his body can also enjoy the opportunity of the primitive ancestral realm, and let the supreme domain body undergo a second transformation. This is the only chance for the dark holy land. The ancestral realm born later will not be born again. Primitive ancestral spring. In a long time ago, when the dark sanctuary was just born, the primitive ancestors were torn apart, but now, the ancestors still yearn for the opportunity of the primitive ancestors. It is a pity to know that the birth of the primitive ancestors is such a precious opportunity that countless supreme ancestors will fight. Yi Tian cannot deny that his strength is indeed very strong, but it does not mean that the supreme domain ancestors of other forces are weak. The major forces have hidden their strengths, and in the annihilation of time and space, those supreme ancestors do not seem to be too enchanting, but who knows if there will be very enchanting ones. Moreover, if there are high-level domain ancestors peak powerhouses, they have already reached the realm of becoming the ancestors, and they have been enduring not to break through. Once they enter the dark soul domain, they will immediately break through to become the ancestors. In this way, the other party is sure to control the dark soul realm, and even prevent other supreme soul ancestors from attacking the ancestor in the future. At the beginning, the holy ancestor was born in the dark soul realm. In addition, the dark soul realm was the first time to know that outside the dark destruction realm, a second dark holy land would be born. It was not ready at all, and this made the dark sanctuary rise. But this time is different. The dark destruction domain and the dark sanctuary are fully prepared and vowed to take the dark soul domain. Therefore, the local residents of the dark soul domain want to be the first ancestor to be born and completely control the dark soul domain. Not very realistic. The major forces really have the supreme peak domain ancestors who can quickly become the ancestors, but it is difficult for them to become the ancestors in the dark soul domain, and it takes a lot of time. After all, they are domain ancestors, not soul ancestors. But my cloned body is different, but it is the supreme soul ancestor, so it is many times easier to become the first ancestor in the dark soul realm. Yi Tian muttered. Soon, the time limit of 1 trillion years will come. Outside the dark souls, a large number of supreme-level domain ancestors have arrived, and even some unfamiliar supreme-level domain ancestors have appeared, which are obviously hidden cards of the major forces. Some of the supreme ancestors are too ancient, some are even older than the ancestors, and each one is extremely terrifying. Obviously, they all gave birth to the ancestors, and they cultivated the ancestors to a high level, and mastered powerful ancestor skills. Terror exists. Yi Tian, A euro is the domain ancestor of the supreme peak, naturally also has to enter the dark soul domain. It can be said that almost all the supreme ancestors will enter the dark soul domain to compete for this opportunity. It is conceivable that this time the primitive ancestral realm will fall into a terrifying battle, and even the primitive ancestral realm of the dark soul realm will be cracked. This day, here, Yi Tian whispered, boom. The dark soul domain has transformed, and the rules have undergone tremendous changes. At the same time, in the central area of A euro the dark soul realm, an incomparably huge world was born in one place. This world is the original ancestral world. As soon as the primordial ancestor realm was born, many Supreme Soul ancestors from the Dark Soul realm came here one after another, and Yi Tian's cloned body, the Qingye Soul ancestor, also came here. Wow wow, a nameless ancestor from the outside world stepped into the Dark Soul realm. Many Supreme-level domain ancestors exude the breath of the peak of the Supreme-level domain ancestors, far exceeding the general Supreme-level soul ancestors. Moreover, these Supreme Soul ancestors have a short cultivation time, and they have not mastered ancestral skills and ancestral bodies. Since Wang Chenjiao is far from being able to compete with these ancient Supreme domain ancestor peak powerhouses. For a time, many Supreme Soul ancestors in the Dark Soul realm were very frightened, for fear that they would be wiped out. From the birth of the primitive ancestral world to the birth of the primitive ancestral spring, it takes some time. Therefore, this period of time is an opportunity for the Supreme Soul ancestor to improve his strength. As a result, many Supreme Soul ancestors instantly escaped into the primordial ancestor realm and hid, looking for innate things that could help them quickly improve their strength. Yi Tian's body also came to the primitive ancestral realm and began to look for various innate things. And the copy body began to impact the realm of the ancestors. At this time, the first to hit the ancestor realm, the benefits are too great, there is no need to wait for the birth of the original ancestor. He believes that there are probably also high-level peak domain ancestors who are also preparing to attack the ancestors. Chapter 1467 Duplicate the body and become the ancestor. Supreme Soul Ancestor or Supreme Domain Ancestor, the way to attack the first ancestor is similar, that is to break through to become the first ancestor with the first ancestor method. The ancestral law is the ultimate of the Tao, the origin of the Tao, and the incarnation of the Tao. To break through with the ancestor method is to transform oneself into Tao. The space ancestor method is to transform the body into the space origin ancestor body, break the limit of the Supreme Soul body or the Supreme Domain body, and achieve the ancestor body. The ancestor's body achieved by the Supreme Domain ancestor is the body of the flesh, while the ancestor's body achieved by the Supreme Soul ancestor is the soul body. But in fact, it's almost the same. Once the ancestor body is achieved, the soul is both the body and the body is the soul. They are extremely powerful and powerful in all aspects. However, the accumulation of no superior peak domain ancestors or soul ancestors at the no superior level is different, and once a breakthrough is made, the strength will naturally be different. The accumulation of Yi Tian's copy body is also enough, although it is not as good as the original body, it is far superior to other supreme level domain ancestors. Therefore, once Yi Tian becomes the first ancestor, his strength will inevitably surpass that of ordinary ancestors. Boom! Yi Tian's body began to be remodeled according to the mystery of the space ancestor law, and transformed towards the space ancestor body. Yi Tian, a euro who has already thoroughly understood the space ancestor method, can naturally condense the space ancestor body easily. In the dark, the power of the source of the dark forbidden area poured into Yi Tian's body. The space ancestor body that Yi Tian 687 condenses is not the same as other ancestors, so the way he cultivates does not conflict with others. A Tao only allows one person to become the first ancestor. Of course, the space ancestor path is also divided into various types. However, if the same ancestor method becomes the first ancestor, it is the same ancestor path. Once it breaks through, it will be repelled and directly shattered by the opponent to Euro's ancestor path, own ancestors. Therefore, once he breaks through to the realm of the ancestors, in the future, other people will not be able to become the ancestors if they practice his spatial ancestor method, but they can integrate the incomplete ancestors and become the half-step ancestors. Endless energy poured into Yi Tian's replica body, helping him achieve the body of the ancestor. Outside the Dark Souls, a famous ancestor looked at the Dark Soul realm and showed shocked expressions. Someone attacked the ancestor, how could it be so fast? The ancestors were shocked. They speculate that there is a superior peak domain ancestor who will attack the ancestor. Once they are ready, there is hope to become the ancestor in the Dark Soul domain. Perhaps because of the way of the domain ancestor, there is no way to take charge of the Dark Soul domain, but once one is born, the ancestor can influence the direction of the Dark Soul realm. If the supreme ancestor of the Dark Destruction realm gave birth to an ancestor, he could use the bloodline of the ancestor to continuously influence the Dark Soul realm to create countless destroying races, and then destroy areas of the Dark Soul realm to create a second destruction realm. If the ancestors were born in the Dark Sanctuary, the way of the ancestors would be torn in the Dark Soul realm, but the ancestors practiced faster. However, it stands to reason that there is no way for the ancestor of the Supreme Peak to be promoted to the ancestor so quickly. The suppression of a Dark Holy Land is not a joke. No, it's not the Supreme Ancestor who hit the Ancestor realm, it's the Supreme Soul Ancestor. The ancestors responded. Soon, there was a superior domain ancestor to investigate, and the target was locked in a short while. In front of the destruction of the first ancestor, a supreme domain ancestor appeared from the Dark Soul domain and reported, the one who destroyed the first ancestor and attacked the first ancestor is the Qingye Soul Ancestor of the human race. Human race, Qingye Soul Ancestor, the genius of the human race who entered the Dark Soul realm, transformed from a half-step domain ancestor to a half-step soul ancestor in a short period of time, and is now hitting the ancestor realm again. How is this possible? The ancestors of destruction were shocked and changed. In such a short time span of 1 trillion years, has someone ascended from the beginning of cultivation to the realm of the ancestors? Even he was far from being able to do it at the beginning, and the holy ancestor of the Dark Sanctuary was far from being able to do it. The holy ancestor of the Dark Sanctuary was unstoppable, and concentrated on the luck of the Dark Sanctuary, and finally broke through to the ancestor realm in the 28th realm year. And a mere trillion years is only a fraction of a boundary year. In such a short period of time, he was also a genius of the human race, not from the disciple of the holy ancestor, which made him unbelievable. On the side of the Dark Sanctuary, a group of ancestors such as the holy ancestor were also stunned. Zanman's Zanzu and Jizu are also very confused. How did the human race suddenly appear such a monster? If you don't look at the combat power, just look at the achievement of becoming the first ancestor, you are more evil than Yi Tian. CJFI. At the very least, Yi Tian has cultivated for such a long time, and has not yet become the first ancestor. Wanfa Zanzu, what happened to the Qingye soul ancestor of your human race? Why did he suddenly attack the first ancestor? Zanzu asked an incarnation of Yi Tian. When the Supreme Domain Ancestor enters the Dark Soul Domain, he will leave an avatar and report the situation inside at any time. I guess there is a chance. Yi Tian said, it is impossible for him to say that it is his own copy body, otherwise other ancestors specifically target his body, which is not good. Once the body falls, it really falls. Zan Ancestor was completely jealous at this moment. The human race was born with such a monstrous genius as Yi Tian. In the future, he would almost certainly succeed as an ancestor. Unexpectedly, an even more monstrous Qingye soul ancestor was born. In the future, it should be called the Qingye ancestor. The key is that once the ancestor of Qingye succeeds in breaking through, he can take charge of a part of the Dark Soul realm. In this way, the ancestor of Qingye is truly invincible within the Dark Soul realm. As time flows, Yi Tian's transformation speed is getting faster and faster. Some people try to interrupt Yi Tian's breakthrough, but Yi Tian's body is nearby. Once there is a superior level domain ancestor, Yi Tian will kill them one after another. Even the ancient supreme level peak domain ancestors are not the opponents of Yi Tian's body. Although Yi Tian's body is not the opponent of the first ancestor, but even the half-step ancestor that is comparable to the 6-pattern annihilation clan is not the opponent of Yi Tian. Millions of years have finally passed. On this day, Yi Tian's cloned body finally completely condensed the ancestor's body, stepped into the ancestor level, and became a space ancestor. Outside the Dark Soul realm, resident, Yi Tian's incarnation was discussing one thing with Zan Zhu and Jia Zhu. Zan Ancestor, Jia Ancestor, and Dark Soul realm currently have two supreme level peak domain ancestors attacking the ancestor realm. One of them is the first ancestor of the Dark Destruction realm, and the other is a domain ancestor of the Dark Sanctuary All Things Saint Gate. Kill them. Kill it. Jia Zhu nodded. Although everyone was in an alliance relationship before, but now the Jixi clan has been wiped out, and everyone is an enemy. Therefore, Zanman naturally does not want other forces to give birth to their ancestors. Thousands of war ancestors, but the ancestors of the green leaves of your human race can only do it once, because the ancestors are not allowed to do something with the ancestors of the supreme domain. This is the default rule. The ancestors of the green leaves have just broken through and don't know this rule, so they can do it. The other ancestors can't say anything. But once they know it, they can't do it. Therefore, the ancestors of Qingye must do it immediately. Zan Zhu reminded. Understood. Yi Tian nodded. Inside the Dark Soul realm, Yi Tian's duplicate body sensed the position of the two Supreme Peak Realm ancestors who were trying to attack the ancestors by taking control of the Dark Soul realm. Next moment, Yi Tian came to the side of the two Supreme Level Peak Domain ancestors, and grabbed it with one hand. No matter how they resisted, it was useless. Boom. The two Supreme Peak Domain ancestors were easily obliterated by Yi Tian, a euro, and they were annihilated without any resistance. Chapter 1468. The ancestor-level replica body has become a permanent clone. The two Supreme Peak Domain ancestors who were impacting the ancestors fell, and their incarnations outside the Dark Soul domain naturally dissipated at the first time. Therefore, the ancestors behind the two Supreme Peak Domain ancestors naturally knew. For the first time, the ancestors of the two forces were angry. These two supreme ancestors of the peak domain, but there are 80 to 90% of the hope to become the ancestors. For the sake of this Dark Soul domain opportunity, they have been holding back to attack the ancestors. It can be said that they have invested too many resources and opportunities in these two supreme ancestors. Now, everything is in vain. Boom! The ancestors of the destruction of the ancestors and the other ancestors of the destruction of the holy ancestors looked at the war gate, and the ancestors of all things of the holy gate of all things couldn't help their own killing intent. There is only one ancestor in the sect of all things. If the supreme ancestor of the peak domain is willing, the sacred sect of all things has already given birth to two ancestors. But now, the hope of the rise of the holy gate of all things is shattered, and he can't wait to destroy the human race. Ancestor of War of 10,000 Laws, the ancestor of your human race, Qingye, killed the ancestor of Guanghong of our holy gate of all things. The ancestor of all things said angrily. He didn't need to ask, and he knew that it was the ancestor of Qingye who did it. After all, Guanghong's sacred ancestor is an unparalleled peak domain ancestor, and his combat power is also extremely powerful, not weaker than the weaker half-step ancestor, and he also needs the ancestor defense weapon given by him. Even the powerful half-step ancestor is difficult to kill in a short time. And just now, the incarnation of Guanghong Shengsu didn't even have a chance to ask for help. The main body was beheaded and the incarnation dissipated. This shows that Guanghong Shengsu was killed in seconds, and the only people who can do this are the Qingye ancestors who have just hit the ancestors and succeeded. I don't know what it is, and it's just the death of a supreme level ancestor. Isn't it normal for the Dark Soul domain to fight, killing and injuring one or two supreme-level ancestors? Why, can't we start a war? Yi Tian said coldly. The ancestors can't take action against the ancestors of the Supreme Peak domain. This is the rule between the ancestors. The Destruction Ancestor was also very angry. After all, the Destruction Saint Ancestor is also a quasi-ancestor. If he hadn't died, an ancestor of the Destruction Saint Ancestor would appear in the Dark Soul realm. This is great news for the Destruction Saint clan, enough to control the Dark Soul realm. A large number of territories, and even a large amount of resources can be obtained. But now, the Supreme Peak Domain ancestor has fallen. How can he not be angry? If Yi Tian's body is there, he is afraid that he will kill Yi Tian with a single thought. Unfortunately, Yi Tian here is just an incarnation, killing it is useless. Boom! The ancestor stopped the furious ancestors of all things and the ancestors of the Dark Destruction domain. And explained. The ancestor of Qingye was only a half-step domain ancestor at the beginning, and now he is quickly promoted to the ancestor realm in the Dark Soul domain. He does not know the agreement of the ancestor. I have asked Wanfa Zanzu to inform the ancestor of Qingye. The ancestor of Qingye is not allowed to kill the ancestors of the Supreme Domain and the ancestors of the Supreme Soul. Could it be that the quasi-ancestor of our holy gate of all things died like this? The ancestor of all things said angrily. Prospective ancestor, that's just what you said. Who knows if it is an ordinary supreme ancestor of the peak domain? Besides, life and death have a life. Since you have entered the Dark Soul domain, you will die if you die. Jiazu said coldly. The ancestor of all things snorted coldly and said nothing. In terms of strength, he is far from being an opponent of Jiazu, and it is not good to be an enemy of Jiazu. Therefore, you can only give up. Although the ancestor of destruction was angry, it was impossible for him to kill Zanzu and Jizu. Besides, Jizu was not his opponent, but there were many means of escape, so he couldn't kill Jizu. Moreover, the holy ancestor of the Dark Sanctuary will definitely not lose the powerful combat power of the Dark Sanctuary, and will definitely block it. When the Dark Soul realm allows the ancestor to enter, I will kill the ancestor of the green leaf. Destroy the ancestor's secret path. Although the first ancestor of Qingye was in charge of a part of the Dark Soul realm, he was not a true body resident after all, and could not completely control the Dark Soul realm. If the ancestors are divided into 3 grades, ordinary ancestors, elite ancestors, and top ancestors. Then, when the Dark Sanctuary was born, the holy ancestor, with the power of the Dark Sanctuary, was able to exert the peak combat power of the elite ancestors, and at that time he was only the elite ancestors, so there was nothing he could do about the ancestors. But now, he is the top ancestor, and the holy ancestor is also the top ancestor. A for flower Sayuro. The first ancestor of Qingye, with the help of the Dark Soul domain, can at most exert the combat power of the weaker elite ancestors, and he is sure to kill such an ancestor of Qingye. He believed that the holy ancestor would not stop him. After all, if the ancestor of Qingye was allowed to live, once the ancestor of Qingye used the Dark Soul realm to grow into an elite ancestor, he could use the Dark Soul realm to exert the combat power of the top ancestor. In that case, the Dark Soul realm will fall into the hands of the human race, which is equivalent to falling into the hands of Zanman. The holy ancestor will bless the powerful ancestor of the Dark Sanctuary, but it will also suppress it to a certain extent. Therefore, he killed the ancestor of Qingye, and the ancestor could not stop him. If the holy ancestor does not block it, the other ancestors will not be able to block it. Yi Tian didn't know that the first ancestor of destruction wanted to kill the first ancestor of Qingye. Even if he knew, he would not worry. After all, the first ancestor of Qingye was just his duplicate body. Moreover, it is still too long to be 100 realms, and the ancestors of Qingye can continue to improve their strength. There is also a lot of hope when they grow to the level of fighting against the destruction of the ancestors. But at this moment, Yi Tian was completely immersed in the new change of copying talent. No, it should be immersed in changes in the ability to replicate. Yi Tian's copy ability can copy creatures whose cultivation level is equal to or lower than his own cultivation level, but he can only copy one. But it is different now, but when the cloned body breaks through to the ancestor realm, this cloned body is no longer a cloned body, but is solidified and becomes a special clone that does not occupy the quota of the cloned body. In other words, the body of the ancestor of Qingye exists independently. It is a special clone that can exist in a permanent existence and cultivate alone, while Yi Tian can continue to use the ability to copy the body. However, he can still only copy the ancestors of the Supreme Peak domain, and cannot copy the ancestors. After all, the copy can be determined according to the main body, not according to the clone. Yes, it means one more ancestor clone. Ha ha ha, in this way, I can continue to use the ability to copy the body, and then continue to use the derivation ability to deduce the ancestor method that suits me. It can even help the ancestor clone to deduce a more powerful ancestor. Skills. Yi Tian thought to himself. Chapter 1469 The human race controls the Dark Soul realm. Yi Tian's cloned body became the first ancestor. Many of the supreme ancestors of the Dark Destruction domain have withdrawn one after another, and even many holy gates of the Dark Sanctuary have also withdrawn the supreme ancestors. No way, the human race gave birth to an ancestor who controlled a part of the Dark Soul domain. Although the first ancestor could not easily kill the supreme domain ancestor, it does not mean that the first ancestor could not trap the supreme domain ancestor, and could not injure the supreme domain ancestor. It can be said that as long as the first ancestor of Qingye creates a little trouble for those supreme ancestors, or locks the position of the supreme ancestors, Yi Tian alone can sweep these supreme ancestors and easily kill these supreme ancestors. In the Dark Soul realm, none of the supreme ancestors can escape the detection of the ancestors of Qingye. In order not to let the supreme level ancestors continue to lose, these forces have dared not let the supreme level ancestors stay in the Dark Soul realm since 687, otherwise they will easily fall. The Supreme Domain ancestors who really dare to stay in the Dark Soul domain are almost all the Supreme Domain ancestors of Zanman and the Supreme Domain ancestors who have a good relationship with Zanman. These forces say hello to the ancestors of Zanman and Yi Tian. Yi Tian naturally wouldn't attack them either. Subsequently, Yi Tian manipulated the primitive ancestral realm of the Dark Soul realm, and with the strength of the cloned ancestor, it was not difficult to block the primitive ancestral realm, and he could even drive away all the Supreme Realm ancestors and Supreme Soul ancestors. He will not show mercy, and only allows the domain ancestors, soul ancestors of the human race, and the soul ancestors and domain ancestors of Zanman to enter the primitive ancestor world, and it is impossible for other forces to enter. In the Dark Soul realm, no one can resist the ancestor of Qingye. This is like the birthplace of the Dark Sacred Domain. The Dark Sacred Gate is the oldest and most powerful sacred sect, and all good things fall into the hands of the Dark Sacred Sect. It is only because the Dark Holy Sect has the most powerful ancestor of the Holy Ancestor. Of course, in addition to the Holy Ancestors, there are two ancestors in today's Dark Holy Gate, but unfortunately the two ancestors are of average strength, so the Dark Holy Gate is not dominant in the top 10 Holy Gates except for the Holy Ancestors, but there are just a few more superior domain ancestors. Moreover, today's Dark Sanctuary has no way to increase the strength of the Holy Ancestor. Coupled with the fact that other ancestors jointly contain the holy ancestors, even the holy ancestors cannot dominate the dark sanctuary. The future of the dark soul realm is also the same. Sooner or later, he will not be able to obtain the increase of the dark soul realm, because the increase has a time effect, which is 100,000 realm years. If after 100,000 years in the realm, the strength of the ancestors of Qingye is not strong, they will still be divided into some territories by other ancestors, which is also an inevitable thing. This day, Yi Tian also sent his family to the Dark Soul Realm. After all, the Dark Soul Realm is safer than the Xuanchu Holy Realm. Moreover, Yi Tian hopes to let his family enjoy the treatment of the original ancestral spring. After all, Yi Tian's wife, daughter, son, and younger sister have all been promoted to the realm of Supreme Domain Ancestor under his full cultivation, but they are only in the initial state of Supreme Domain Ancestor. Once they have entered the original ancestral spring, they can easily be banned from being promoted to the peak realm of the Supreme Realm Ancestor. Coupled with several other human race Supreme Ancestors, they have also broken through to the peak state of Supreme Ancestors, and the strength of the human race is very terrifying, even stronger than a holy gate. Another time passed. On this day, the primordial ancestral spring of the primordial ancestral world was born. Yi Tian's body and the supreme ancestors of the human race came here one after another, and the supreme ancestors of the war gates also came here, and they can soon enter the primordial ancestry. The springs gain the benefits of the original ancestral springs. The Supreme Peak Domain Ancestor can obtain the second Supreme Domain Body transformation, and the benefits are the greatest. And other Supreme Domain Ancestors can also quickly temper the Supreme Domain Body, and the cultivation base will increase rapidly, which is also a benefit. Wanfa Zanzu, this time thanks to the Qingye ancestors of your human race, otherwise these Supreme Ancestors of our war gate would have to go through a tragic slaughter if they wanted to enter the original ancestral spring, and a Supreme Ancestor like Miyuzu is not qualified to come in at all. Fire Mark Zanzu said with a smile. Indeed, he is only in the middle stage of the Supreme Domain Ancestor, his strength is too weak, and there are too many Supreme Domain Ancestors stronger than him. But this time, he was lucky and could enter the original ancestral spring. Once he was tempered by the original ancestral spring water, he completed the second transformation of the Supreme Domain Body and broke the extreme of the Supreme Domain Body. It was hopeless, but it was possible. Raise the cultivation base to the peak realm of the Supreme Domain Ancestor. At that time, he also belongs to the most powerful group of Supreme Ancestors in the Dark Sanctuary. Let's all go in and practice, who can get better benefits depends on their ability. Yi Tian said. After all, the terrifying opportunity of the primitive ancestral spring only existed when the primordial ancestral world was born, and it did not always exist. It was a one-time consumption opportunity. Once the spring water of the primordial ancestral spring was exhausted, there was no way to continue to be born. Once, when the Dark Sanctuary was born, the Holy Ancestor and several ancestors used the original ancestral spring water to complete the accumulation of the ancestors from the early stage to the peak realm, and only then could they break through to the ancestor realm in a short period of time. Otherwise, the Holy Ancestor will not be able to break through to the ancestor realm before the ancestor of the Dark Destruction Domain arrives. The Supreme Ancestors of the human race and the Supreme Ancestors of Zonman entered the original ancestral spring one after another. Boom! The energy of the original ancestral spring poured into their bodies, helping them to refine the Supreme Domain Body. When these Supreme-level ancestors were cultivating, many ancestors outside the Dark Soul Domain left, and many Supreme-level ancestors also left. After all, in the Dark Soul realm where the ancestor of Qingye is located, the major forces can't get any benefits. Even if they fight outside, so what? It will not affect the situation in the Dark Soul realm. Because of 5.8, they simply left. When waiting for 100 years of the realm, the first ancestor can come, and it will be settled at that time. From now on, during the 100 years of the realm, the Dark Soul realm is almost under the control of the human race. Time passed slowly, and the energy of the original ancestral spring continued to decrease. In particular, Yi Tian absorbed too much energy from the primordial ancestor spring. According to such an absorption rate, there are probably many Supreme Domain Ancestors who would not be able to raise their cultivation to the peak state of Supreme Domain Ancestor. Everyone is trying to absorb them, but some Supreme-level Domain Ancestors are too weak, and the speed of absorption is too slow. It's almost there. My Supreme-level Domain Body can transform once more, breaking the extreme of the Supreme-level Domain Body. Yi Tian muttered a euro. Chapter 1470 The Power of the Ultimate Ancestral Skill. Boom! Yi Tian's supreme domain body ushered in a qualitative change under the quenching of a large number of primitive ancestral springs. The peak of the supreme domain body was originally the pinnacle of the domain body, and the body of the ancestor was no longer a domain body. Originally, there was no way for any treasure to temper the domain body of the supreme peak, but with the help of the original ancestor, Yi Tian could break the peak of the supreme domain body. Click! Yi Tian's supreme domain body shattered into countless pieces, but quickly recovered. At this time, he has already broken the shackles, and began to frantically absorb the energy here to promote the breakthrough of the supreme domain body. Time passed slowly, and Yi Tian's second transformation of the supreme domain body was completely completed. 10 times. Yi Tian felt the brand new supreme domain body, 10 times stronger than before. The supreme domain body is 10 times stronger, and the overall combat power is indeed less than 10 times, but it has also increased several times. At the peak of the supreme realm of the ancestors, every progress would have taken infinite years, and 29 had not even made any progress at all. But now, the strength has increased several times in a short period of time, which is already very terrifying. After Yi Tian broke through, he looked at his family again. Son, daughter, their cultivation base has also improved very fast, and they have reached the late stage of the supreme domain ancestor, and they can swallow the energy of the spring water faster than the average supreme domain ancestor. After all, Yi Tian has also given them a lot. Holy Fu, and even bestowed ancestral Fu. Therefore, there is no way for other supreme ancestors to compare. It can be said that before the original Zuquan is completely scrapped, they can definitely break through to the peak state of the supreme ancestor. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of thousands of years have passed. This day, the original ancestral spring was completely scrapped, and the spring water in it was exhausted. Boom boom boom. A powerful ancestor of the supreme peak domain and the supreme soul ancestor showed their breath. For example, several peak ancestors of the War Gate have also completed the second transformation at this time, and their strength has increased greatly, but they are similar to Yi Tian. Then, it is still ants. As for the other supreme level ancestors, almost all of them have been promoted to the late stage of supreme level ancestors and the peak state of supreme level. The same is true on the human race side, and the Supreme Soul Ancestor has also been promoted to the late stage of the Supreme Soul Ancestor. It's a pity that the original Ancestor Spring's energy is limited, and coupled with Yi Tian, a big energy swallower, there is no way for all the Supreme Soul Ancestors and Supreme Domain Ancestors to break through to the peak of Supreme Domain Ancestors and Supreme Soul Ancestors. Peak state. However, they were also very satisfied. Because of the tempering of the primitive ancestors, their future cultivation will be much easier, and they will have full confidence in breaking through to the peak of the Supreme Domain Ancestor and the peak of the Supreme Soul Ancestor in the future. In the next days, Yi Tian moved a large number of practitioners from the Xuanshu Sacred Realm to the Dark Soul Realm, and Zanman would naturally not stop them, and other forces were not in the mood to stop them now. Therefore, there are more and more human races in the Dark Soul Realm. And with a large supply of resources, there are more and more invincible ancestors of the human race, but it is very difficult to give birth to the Supreme Soul Ancestor. Because at this time the benefits of the Dark Soul Realm are gone, all practitioners cultivate like the outside world. For example, the Dark Sanctuary, even the descendants of the first ancestor, it is very difficult to become the Supreme Ancestor. The same is true of today's Dark Soul Realm. It is too difficult to give birth to a new Supreme Soul Ancestor. Yi Tian doesn't care about this. The human race can give birth to a large number of invincible soul ancestors, this is fine. There are many invincible soul ancestors, and there will always be a few who can break through to the Supreme Soul Ancestor realm in the future. And Yi Tian himself continued to retreat, constantly using the cloned body to derive the ancestor method. He is going to start creating his own ancestor method, and use his own ancestor method to attack the ancestor realm. And the ancestor clone is not without things to do. The clone also needs to practice to improve the strength, otherwise, after 100 realm years, the ancestors will come, and those ancestors will never let him go. Especially destroying the first ancestor, he definitely doesn't mind killing his first ancestor clone. It's okay for the ancestor clone to fall, but without the blessing of the ancestor clone, the human race will be in trouble, and even the main body can only hide in the battle gate. After all, the human race has offended all the forces except Zanman this time, and suddenly occupied the resources of the Dark Soul Realm. What a terrifying resource, the ancestors were moved. Certainly, In order to win over the ancestors of Zanman, Yi Tian also gave some resources of the Dark Soul domain to Zanman, so that Zanman could produce a large number of invincible ancestors and some supreme ancestors. At least 100 years later, the two ancestors of Zanman definitely helped him. It is very difficult for the ancestors to improve their strength. Although the Dark Soul realm has also produced resources that are useful to the ancestors, the resources that really make the ancestors fighter after 100 realm years. Now I want to rely on the resources of the Dark Soul realm to quickly improve the strength of the ancestors. This is unrealistic, Yi Tian thought to himself. Therefore, he must find a way to improve the strength of the ancestors' clone. He communicated with the two ancestors of Zanman. The ancestors wanted to improve their strength mainly to improve the 687 strength of the ancestors, as well as strengthen the body of the ancestors and the soul of the ancestors. This is similar to the ancestor of the domain, which is the improvement of the cultivation base. The ancestor has no realm incarnation, only the division of combat power. Ordinary ancestors, elite ancestors, and top ancestors. Most ancestors are ordinary ancestors, even Zan ancestors are ordinary ancestors, but Jizu is a powerful elite ancestor, second only to the top ancestors. It is necessary to take your time to improve your cultivation. Unless you obtain a treasure that greatly improves your cultivation, there is no way to quickly improve your cultivation. There is another way to greatly increase the strength, that is to master the ultimate ancestral skills. However, there are no more than 5 ancestors who have mastered the ultimate ancestral skills. Of course, this is information on the bright side. If any ancestor hides his strength, then the other ancestors have no way to know. The ancestors mastered an ultimate ancestral technique, the Holy Ancestor, the Ancestor of Destruction, the Eternal Leader and the Ancestor of Time and Space. These 5 ancestors all mastered an ultimate ancestral technique. It is precisely because of the ultimate ancestral skills that they are so powerful. If Yi Tian mastered the ultimate ancestral skill, he would have weaker combat power. At that time, if the cultivation base of the ancestor is slightly improved, and then part of the power of the Dark Soul domain is in charge, it is absolutely certain to fight against the ancestor. Chapter 1471 The first ultimate ancestral skill, the ultimate ancestral armor. The ultimate ancestral skill is a difficult ancestral skill for other ancestors to master, but for me, although it is also difficult, there is great hope. Yi Tian thought to himself. Because he owns several ultimate ancestral fu, all of which are the ultimate ancestral fu that has been formed by copying the ancestral fu of the Annihilation clan and constantly merging. At present, he has 5 ultimate ancestors, the ultimate strength ancestor, the ultimate defense ancestor, the ultimate speed ancestor, the ultimate silence ancestor and the ultimate time ancestor. Therefore, he hopes to master these 5 types of ultimate ancestor skills, and the difficulty is at least 1,000 times lower than other ancestors. Of course, Yi Tian couldn't pin all his hopes on the ultimate ancestral skills. What if the time of 100 realm years was not enough? Therefore, he must also improve his cultivation. It is not easy to improve the cultivation base of the ancestors, and we must rely on the Annihilation treasure. Yi Tian thought. Now, the human race controls the Dark Soul domain. If he creates a large area of a Euro Annihilation time and space, and uses many high-level resources to derive Annihilation time and space, he creates more Annihilation resources, all of which are used by the cloned ancestors of Qingye, and improve the ancestors of Qingye. Cultivation. 100 years in the realm is enough to make the cultivation base of the first ancestor of the Avatar skyrocket, and the strength is very likely to be promoted to the realm of the elite realm. If you master an ultimate ancestor skill, your combat power will soar to be comparable to the ancestor of the realm, combat power. Only then can you use the Dark Soul realm to compete with the top ancestors such as the ancestors and the ancestors of destruction. This day, Yi Tian used the ultimate ancestral level Annihilation ancestral fu to start to create an Annihilation time and space, which is larger than the previous Annihilation time and space, and it is easier to give birth to high-quality Annihilation treasures. After all, even the Nirvana clan does not have the ultimate ancestral ancestry. The avatars of the ancestors of Qingye and Yi Tian work together to manage this Annihilation time and space. The main body's task is to deduce the ancestors' method and to deduce the ultimate ancestral skills, and the task of the avatar's ancestors is to refine the Annihilation treasures and improve the cultivation. 4. In this way, the human race's population has been terribly increased in the Dark Soul realm, and the human race that was born later can be regarded as the native residents of the Dark Soul realm, and has been recognized by the Dark Soul realm. And with sufficient resources, it almost dominates a dark holy land, so the strength of the human race has long surpassed the general holy gate. Under such circumstances, the human race also gave birth to Holy Land level forces. Of course, the most powerful force is the human race temple, and any human race force must be under the jurisdiction of the temple. And even if those supreme domain ancestors established their powers, they had to make a name for themselves in the temple. These supreme domain ancestors were almost all cultivated by Yitian, so naturally they did not dare to have any thoughts. A realm year quickly passed. For many human races, this is an incomparably long period of time, and in such a long period of time, the human race only has 3 more supreme ancestors. This is a very slow speed for Yitian, but for those holy gates, the birth of 3 supreme level ancestors in 1 realm year is a very fast speed. If this speed can be maintained, how terrifying it is what? But in the future, a realm year may not be able to give birth to a supreme realm ancestor. This is not only a limitation of racial luck, but also a limitation of a dark holy place. In 1 realm year, Yitian has refined a large number of annihilation treasures. If it is given to the supreme domain ancestors who can refine the annihilation treasures, almost all of them can create hundreds of supreme domain ancestors. But so many annihilation treasures have only increased the strength of the clone Qingye ancestor several times, and the further the strength is improved, the slower it is. Fortunately, the resources of the treasures born recently in the Dark Soul realm are of higher quality, and the quality of the annihilation treasures cultivated in the future will also be higher. And the longer the annihilation time and space operate, the higher the annihilation treasures are born. Moreover, the silence time and space here are of higher quality. It is different from the time and space of annihilation at the edge of the Dark Forbidden area. There are a large number of annihilation tribes in the time and space of annihilation. In addition, the ancestors cut leaks, so that the energy of annihilation there cannot grow. But I continue to invest resources, annihilation. The energy has been skyrocketing. At this speed, it is absolutely possible to cultivate top-level annihilation treasures, and it is a large number of top-level annihilation treasures. In 100 years, I can definitely accumulate my cultivation strength to the elite domain ancestor level, F. Yitian said with full confidence. However, after such a long time, Yitian still did not advance an ancestral skill to the ultimate ancestral skill realm, but he frowned. Moreover, Yitian's own ancestral method creation has some eyebrows, but only some eyebrows. It will take a longer time to create and deduce. 2 realm years have passed. 3 realm years have passed. 10 realm years have passed. Unconsciously, the Dark Soul realm passed 18 realm years. On this day, Yitian laughed loudly, and the voice spread throughout the entire primitive ancestral world. The reason why he was so excited was that he finally created an ultimate ancestral skill. This ancestral skill is based on the deduction of the ancestral armor. After his 18 years of deduction, he did not know how many times the body was broken and copied, and then the ultimate ancestral skill, the ultimate ancestral armor was derived. I have the ultimate strength ancestors at the ultimate ancestor level, and I have used the body copying Holy Soul derivative deduction again and again, exhausting the power of the Holy Soul countless times, and spending 18 realm years. Only time has deduced the ultimate ancestral skills, and if there is no great chance to destroy the ancestors, the holy ancestors, and the ancestors, I am afraid it will take 100,000 realm years and millions of realms. There is no way for Yunyan to create the ultimate ancestral skill. It seems that the Dark Sanctuary has only been born for hundreds of thousands of years. They have mastered the ultimate ancestral skills, and they have definitely encountered a great opportunity that I can't imagine. Wang Chenjiao Yitian guessed. However, he didn't guess the great chance of the ancestors and destroy the ancestors. In short, no matter how big the chance is, it is not as big as the chance of copying the talent. But now, he has created the ultimate ancestor armor. The defense alone has reached a terrifying level. Unless the sacred ancestor and the first ancestor are destroyed, the other ancestors cannot harm him at all. If he borrows the power of the Dark Soul domain, Saint Ancestor and Destruction Ancestor could not kill him. In the Dark Soul realm, the Holy Ancestor and the First Ancestor of Destruction can't kill me, but they can kill the clan. I must also master an attack-type Ultimate Ancestor skill. Yitian thought to himself. So, he began to study the ultimate ancestral skills of power. Once he created an attack-type ultimate power ancestral skill, with the increase of the Dark Soul domain, his combat power soared to a level comparable to the destruction of the ancestors and the holy ancestors. Even if it was weaker, it would not be too weak. Chapter 1472 Create an Ancestor Method. Yi Tian chose to use the domineering ancestral skills among the ancestral skills as the object of research and deduction, and strive to deduce the ultimate ancestral skills of dominance. After all, he has successfully created an ultimate ancestral skill, which is considered to be experienced. Therefore, although it is still difficult to continue to study the second ancestral skill, it can at least save a little time. So, in the next years of the realm, Yi Tian spent most of his time creating the ultimate domineering ancestral skills. As for the human race, he almost didn't care, and almost let the Supreme Soul Ancestors and Supreme Domain Ancestors of the temple manage them. In this way, 17 realm years have passed. This day, Yi Tian finally created the ultimate domineering ancestral skill, and his strength increased greatly. Then, Yi Tian spent more than a dozen years in the realm to create a speed-class ultimate ancestral skill, the ultimate ancestral skill of Streamer. Defense, speed, strength, these three ultimate ancestral skills are all created. It can be said that Yi Tian's strength has skyrocketed a lot, and there are no flaws. Coupled with the dozens of realm years that have continuously refined a large number of annihilation treasures, the cultivation base has risen sharply. Therefore, Yi Tian's current strength has already reached the extremely powerful elite domain ancestor's combat power. This is a kind of perception and enlightenment as the first ancestor, and there is no need to test the combat power. If 687 relies on the power of the Dark Soul realm, Yi Tian is absolutely not afraid of the ancestors and destroys the ancestors. Finally, you don't have to worry about destroying the ancestors and the two ancestors. There are dozens of years left, and it is more difficult to improve the strength of the ancestors of Qingye. It is estimated that they cannot be promoted to the level of the top ancestors. Next, lead a Euro's focus on comprehending the law of the first ancestor of creation. Yi Tian decided. For dozens of years in the realm, Yi Tian's body's ancestor law has not been created. If he only created the general ancestor law, he would have created it long ago, but the ancestor law he wants to create is the endless ancestor law, including all ancestors. Road. But he clearly has a major insight, and even figured out the doorway, but he is still only one step away, and he has never been able to create it completely. Another realm year passed. Yi Tian's progress stagnated. No, there has been no progress in such a long time. Even if it is only one step away, it must be understood in the wrong direction. Yi Tian thought to himself. The endless ancestral law cannot really contain all the first ancestor laws. The first ancestor law is theoretically infinite, so it must be based on the basic ancestral law. It is too difficult to create the endless ancestor method at one time. You can create a basic ancestral method in advance, and then combine many ancestral method, so as to completely create the endless ancestor method. Moreover, after creating a basic ancestor method, some supreme ancestors or soul ancestors of the race can be combined with the ancestor method, thus becoming a famous ancestor. In this way, the human race will give birth to a large number of ancestors. However, even if there is an uncultivated ancestor method, it is more difficult to integrate, so it is not necessarily suitable, and it will take endless long years. And other people don't have the ability to use derivation indefinitely like him, shattering and copying their bodies again and again, and other people's bodies will fall after shattering their bodies. Thus, his path cannot be copied by others. However, there is a complete first ancestor law. This is an opportunity. One day will become the first ancestor. Let's start with the golden ancestral law. Yi Tian decided. His understanding of the first ancestor law was extremely profound, even surpassing those of the first ancestors. Many ancestors obtained the first ancestor law by accident, and after they merged, they became the first ancestor. Although some of them created the first ancestor law, they were also more general ancestors. The most powerful is the ancestor of time and space. The other party created the ancestor of time and space, so the potential is very high, but the training time is short, so there is no way to surpass the destruction of the ancestor. But if the ancestors of time and space are given endless years of cultivation, they will really surpass the ancestors of destruction and become the first ancestors of the ancestors of destruction. But compared with the endless ancestor method created by Yi Tian in the future, the space-time ancestors time-space ancestor method is mediocre. Moreover, Yi Tian's foundation is far from being comparable to that of the ancestor of time and space. 3 years later, Yi Tian was extremely excited. At this moment, he has already created a golden ancestor method. Although it is based on a golden ancestor method he created, other people can also comprehend and cultivate. If this golden ancestor method is broken into pieces, one can even give birth to a half-step ancestor of the race. Of course, the half-step ancestor is useless to the human race. If you want to achieve it, you will become the ancestor. But only one golden ancestor method can only make a supreme ancestor or soul ancestor become the ancestor. Next, every few realm years, Yi Tian was able to create an ancestor law. The ancestor method of wood, the ancestor method of water, the ancestor method of fire, the ancestor method of earth, the ancestor method of light, the ancestor method of darkness. A door ancestor method was created by Yi Tian. A euro if other ancestors knew, they would be stunned and unbelievable. Even if they destroy the ancestors and the holy ancestors, such top ancestors, and let them create other ancestor methods, they can't create them. Destroying the first ancestor is on the road of destroying the first ancestor. The first ancestor method he created is the first ancestor method of destruction. If he can go to the first ancestor method of creation gold, he will be blinded, so he doesn't understand it at all. That is Yi Tian, a euro who walks the endless path, so he can create many ancestor methods. In addition, the destruction ancestor has already created a destruction ancestor method, and there is no way to continue to create a second destruction ancestor method. If you try to create it, you will return to the same ancestral ancestor method in the dark. It is precisely because of this that destroying the ancestors cannot help other supreme ancestors to become the ancestors. If other people want to become the ancestors, they can only rely on themselves, and there is no way to rely on the ancestors. Otherwise, it is impossible for many holy gates to have only one ancestor or two ancestors. And Yi Tian is too evil, and now he has created so many ancestors, which is enough for the people to give birth to a famous ancestor. Only the space ancestor law and the time ancestor law are left. Yi Tian muttered, although he has a space ancestor method, it is someone else's space ancestor method. In order to create his own space ancestor method, which is not affected by the space ancestor method of the first ancestor of Qingye, Yi Tian's body directly shielded the connection with the clone of the first ancestor of Green Leaf, and erased the memory of the space ancestor method in his mind, and thus begin to create. Otherwise, once it is affected, the creation of the space ancestral law will not be able to succeed. Chapter 1473 Relatives begin to choose the ancestor law. €1 subscription €1. If you want to create a space ancestor method, the difficulty is naturally much higher than creating other ancestor methods. But Yi Tian still has enough time, so he doesn't worry about the lack of time. Anyway, his clone, the ancestor of Qingye, has grown to a level that is enough to resist the destruction of the ancestor, so there is no need to worry about safety issues. In the years that followed, Yi Tian devoted himself to creating the space ancestor method. A realm year, years of 2 realms, 3 realms year. Before you know it, the 13 years of the realm have passed. On this day, Yi Tian finally created the space ancestor method. Moreover, the space ancestor method he created is much better than the space ancestor law obtained from the void ancestor. If he becomes the first ancestor with his space ancestor method, he can definitely become a powerful space ancestor. There is still time for the ancestral law, continue to create. Yi Tian secretly said. It took Yi Tian 13 years to create the space ancestor method, and the time ancestor method is more terrifying than the space ancestor method, so it is more difficult. This time, Yi Tian spent 18 years in the realm before finally creating the time ancestor method. So far, the basic ancestor law has all been created. Next, Yi Tian needs to integrate these basic ancestor methods into the endless ancestor method. And this step is equally difficult. I am afraid it will take a long time, but at least there is a clear direction, so that it will not fall into a bottleneck and cannot be broken. Before the retreat, you need to teach these ancestor methods to Yue'e and Xingchen. Yi Tian thought. His wife, son, daughter, and sister are already at the peak of the supreme realm of the ancestors, and their cultivation base has no progress. Only by cultivating ancestral skills and tempering ancestral bodies can they continue to improve. And they also need to integrate the ancestor law to break through to the ancestor realm. With their own understanding and talent, it is not hopeless to create the ancestor law, but the hope is not very great. Even if it can be created, it will take endless long years. Instead, it is better to integrate his ancestor method, and there is still hope to grow to the elite ancestor realm in the future. Therefore, Yi Tian wanted to pass on these ancestral laws to them. Yue'e, Xingchen, Xingyu, Xiaoyu, come here. Yi Tian's divine sense transmitted to them. Whoa, Xiaoyu, Yi Xingchen, Yi Xingyu and Yi Yu ripped apart the space and came to Yi Tian. Husband, 1, father, elder brother, the 4 shouted one by one. Yi Tian looked at the 4 of them and said, I have created some first ancestor methods, all of which are top-notch ones, and I want to consult your opinions. You still choose to integrate my first ancestor method to become the first ancestor, or choose to create your own ancestor. Law 1. Some ancestral laws. The four of them widened their eyes, revealing an incredible look. How precious is the first ancestor law. The dark forbidden realm does not know how many evil geniuses have no way to create the first ancestor law, and even have no way to obtain a complete and unowned first ancestor law, so they cannot be promoted to the first ancestor in their entire life. Even some broken ancestor methods have become treasures robbed by many supreme ancestors, and they all want to use such broken ancestor methods to become half-step ancestors. And the complete ancestor method can't even be created by the ancestors, so if there is a complete masterless ancestor method, even the ancestors will snatch and kill, and seek an opportunity for their descendants to become the ancestors. There are too few ancestors in the dark forbidden area, just because the ancestor method is too rare and too difficult to create. But now, Yi Tian said that he has created some ancestor methods, obviously more than one. If this sentence spreads, it will definitely cause a big shock in the entire dark forbidden area, and all the ancestors have to stare at Yi Tian. Husband, I choose to integrate the ancestor method you created. Xiao Yu chose. She has no confidence in herself. Other Supreme Peak Domain ancestors have no way to create the first ancestor law, and the Supreme Peak Domain ancestor she has grown up relying on Yi Tian. Where does she have the potential to create a first ancestor law of her own? Therefore, it is very good to be able to obtain an ancestor law that suits you, and the others cannot be forced. Okay, these ancestor methods, you choose a fusion. The ancestor method is very domineering. As long as you can successfully integrate, it will forcibly reverse the way you practice, so it doesn't matter whether it is suitable for you, the impact is not very big. Of course, naturally there is no ancestor law that is absolutely suitable for you. Ask for flowers, Yi Tian said. Whoa whoa whoa. A family of ancestor law inheritance appeared in front of Xiao Yu. Xiao Yu checked these ancestor methods and finally made a decision. Husband, I choose the ancestor method of light. Okay, I'll give you this ancestor's method of light. Yi Tian integrated the first ancestor method of light into Xiao Yu's soul. Once Xiao Yu integrates the first ancestor method of light, other people will not be able to achieve the first ancestor even if they get this first ancestor method of light in the future, they can only borrow it. The ancestral art of light has learned about the sacred and ancestral skills of the light system. Yi Yu, Yi Xingchen, and Yi Xingyu also chose to integrate the ancestor method and did not create it. They also feel that there is little hope of self-creation, so they do not waste time. Moreover, where did they dare to imagine being the first ancestor before? They were satisfied to be the ancestor of the supreme domain, so the requirements were not too high. It's your turn, Xiao Yu. Yi Tian let Yi Yudi choose. As for the two juniors Yi Xingchen and Yi Xingyu, they were naturally the third and fourth choices, and the two of them had absolutely no opinion. Yi Yu chose the ice ancestor method without hesitation. Brother, I choose the ice ancestor method. Yi Tian nodded and integrated the ice ancestral law into Yi Yu's soul. Then, it was Yi Xingchen's turn. Yi Xingchen pondered for a while, and finally chose the extremely powerful space ancestor method. In this way, after he becomes the ancestor, his strength will be stronger than the general ancestor. Not to be outdone, Yi Xingyu chose the time ancestor method, which happened to be on the same level as her brother Yi Xingchen, and the time and space were opposite, they were brothers and sisters, which was very suitable. Certainly, if they want to fully understand the time ancestor law and the space ancestor law, it will take a long time, but eventually they will be able to comprehend thoroughly one day and become a famous ancestor. Yi Tian's family has chosen the first ancestor law. As for other first ancestor laws, he will not give it to others for the time being. He will only grant these first ancestral laws unless someone can meet his requirements. It's time to continue the retreat, integrate these ancestor methods, and create an endless ancestor method that belongs to me. Yi Tian entered the training room and continued to retreat and create. Chapter 1474 Endless Ancestor Method, Create Success. €1 subscription €1. When Yi Tian's body retreated to create the endless ancestor method, the progress of the cloned Qingye ancestor slowed down. After all, the avatar of the ancestor of Qingye was promoted by Yi Tian's pursuit of speed, and it was not comparable to the main body, so the potential was far less than that of the main body, and the avatar of the ancestor of the green leaf was a space ancestor method that integrated the ancestor of the void. After all, at that time, in order to pursue rapid promotion to the first ancestor, naturally there was no way to think too much, and there was not so much time to slowly create the first ancestor method. Otherwise, if other people were promoted to the first ancestor, then the other party might attack the human race. Even the body starts. In that case, the human race would not be as prosperous as it is today. Because it is not promoted by the method of self-founding ancestors, the potential of the ancestors of Qingye is limited, and now it is about to reach its limit. Unless a better opportunity is obtained, the limit can be broken. And those annihilated treasures can only improve their cultivation, and there is no way for Qing, 687, Yi ancestors to break the limit. At present, it is estimated that the clone of the ancestor of Qingye can only reach the powerful level of the ancestor of the elite, second only to the ancestor of the top. With the help of the Dark Soul domain, it can compete with the ancestor of the top. In the future, no matter how to refine the silent treasure, the extent of strength improvement will be limited. Yi Tian muttered. Of course, the clone of the ancestor of Qingye can still improve now, but it is many times slower than before, so he doesn't like it. If other ancestors knew about the speed of Yi Tian's progress, they would be extremely jealous. The speed of progress that Yi Tian does not look down on, even the top ancestors like the ancestors and the ancestors of destruction are very envious. A domain year passes by a domain year. When the eyes of many ancestors and forces focused on the Dark Soul realm, almost no one cared about places like Xuanshu Holy Realm. Even if something happened here, no one would care. And Yi Tian's incarnation has been sitting in the Xuanshu Holy Realm all the time, always paying attention to the changes in the Xuanshu Holy Realm. At this time, the Xuanshu Holy Realm was many times larger than in the past, and even many rare resources and sacred objects were born, and treasures that were only born in the ancestral realm were also born. In addition, the heaven and human realm in the Xuanshu Holy Realm has also produced a large number of treasures, and the star taboo tree has once again bred the star taboo fruit, which is enough to make many invincible domain ancestors temper the invincible domain body to the extreme realm of the invincible domain body. Although compared with the Dark Soul realm, the resources of the Xuanshu Holy Realm are very low-end, far inferior to the Dark Soul realm. However, the potential here is very high, not lower than the Dark Soul realm, and it is even expected to become the fourth Dark Holy Land in the future. The Xuanshu Holy Realm is about to become the ancestral realm, but now I can't let the Xuanshu Holy Realm become the ancestral realm, otherwise it will definitely attract the attention of the ancestors. My body and the ancestors' clone are guarding the Dark Soul realm, and there is no way to manage Xuanshu Sage for the time being. In this world, the promotion of the Xuanshu Holy Realm must be suppressed. Yi Tian thought. He is going to wait for the body to create the endless ancestor method, and after being promoted to the ancestor, he will let the Xuanshu sacred realm evolve into the ancestral realm. In that case, he can also resist the prying eyes from other ancestors, and can even explain that he has obtained a treasure from the Dark Soul realm, which can promote the Xuanshu Holy Realm to the ancestral realm. In this case, the ancestors can focus their attention on the Dark Soul realm, and no one will spy on the secrets of the Xuanshu Holy Realm. This day, there was a joy in the human race. An invincible domain ancestor was promoted to the supreme domain ancestor realm in Xuanshu Holy Realm. As a result, many invincible domain ancestors could not be promoted to supreme domain ancestors in the Dark Soul domain, and felt that the Dark Soul domain was not suitable for the domain ancestors to practice, so they returned to the Xuanshu Holy World one by one. Gradually, the Dark Soul realm is almost all human ancestors, and the ancestors of the realm have all returned to the Xuanshu Holy Realm. Unconsciously, the 100-year realm year of the birth of the Dark Soul realm is approaching, and the ancestors of the major forces are eager to move. Battle ancestors. The two ancestors of Zanman have also returned here long ago, leaving only the avatars to stay outside the Dark Soul realm. At this time, Zan Zhu and Jia Zhu were chatting with an avatar of Yi Tian. The ancestors of Wanfa will soon reach the 100th year of the realm. Destroying the ancestors is afraid that they will attack the ancestors of the green leaves of your human race. Please give me a thorough understanding of how powerful the ancestors of the green leaves are now, with the help of some dark souls. After the power of the domain, is there any hope to resist the ancestors of destruction? If we can't resist, we must give up the territory of the Dark Soul domain and join forces with the major holy gates of the Dark Holy domain to compete with the ancestors of the Dark Destruction domain. As long as the benefits given big enough, they will still join forces with us. Yi Tian said with a smile. Zan ancestor, Jia ancestor, don't worry, the current strength of the Qingye ancestor has reached the top level of the elite ancestor, second only to the top ancestor. With the increase of the Dark Soul realm, he can definitely play his role. The combat power of the top ancestors is no problem to block the destruction of the ancestors. However, even so, we must give up part of the site. Otherwise, there is no way to stop all the ancestors. Yi Tian never thought of completely ruling the entire Dark Soul realm, but it is no problem to occupy the best area, and it is not a big problem to give other areas to other holy gates and the ancestors of the Dark Destruction realm. A euro. That's good. Zhanzu and Jia Zhu nodded slightly. Although it is very abnormal for the strength of the ancestors of Qingye to increase so quickly, they are not surprised. After all, the ancestors of Qingye can be promoted to ancestors in such a short time. It is normal to have such strength. At the beginning, the holy ancestor was the same. However, they never thought that the ancestor of Qingye was actually Yi Tian's clone. Yi Tian did not reveal it at all, otherwise some secrets would be leaked. Dark Souls. Yi Tian is already at a critical moment. He is about to create the endless ancestral law. Some years have passed. This day, in Yi Tian's mind, countless auras suddenly appeared, the essence of the ancestors fused together, plus the insights and researches of dozens of years in the realm, and finally these insights merged into one. The endless ancestral law was finally created. Boom. In the depths of the soul, the French words of the ancestors merged into a ball, and the endless mysteries of the ancestors permeated. This ball is the inheritance of the endless beginning 5.8 ancestral law, which is now officially in the world. The endless ancestor method has been created, and it is not completely finalized. It is still evolving, and it has evolved many ancestors. Finally, 3,000 ancestors have been derived, and even more endless ancestors. It seems to be a collection of countless ancestor laws. This is the true endless ancestor method. This evolution took trillions of years before it was finally completed, and it turned into the most perfect endless ancestor method. The endless ancestor method was created, and then Yi Tian only needed to comprehend and understand the endless ancestor Fei, and then merge to become the first ancestor. The endless ancestor method was created by the heavens. Although it has evolved into a more perfect form, he can also fully understand it quickly and easily integrate the endless ancestor method. Therefore, it won't be long before he can become an ancestor. Chapter 1475 Condensing the endless ancestor body, the body will eventually become the endless ansas. Outside the Dark Souls, an ancestor appeared, and these ancestors were not incarnations, but their real bodies came here. Just because tens of thousands of years have passed, the Dark Soul realm has been born for 100 realm years. At this time, the Dark Soul realm no longer restricts the entry of the ancestors. And at this time, the Dark Soul realm will give birth to the second ancestor realm, and the ancestor realm will also give birth to more rare resources, even the resources that the ancestors can use. The ancestors didn't care about the resources before, those resources didn't help them much, but now it's different. What they are waiting for is today. For these opportunities in the territory of the Dark Soul domain, they would even kill each other. At this time, the destruction ancestor exudes an extremely strong aura of destruction, and the faintly revealed murderous intention makes many ancestors tremble with fear. At this time, the ancestors communicated secretly. The Aoba ancestor of the human race is afraid to be finished. How far can he grow in a mere 100 years? When the Dark Soul realm was able to survive the crisis, it was the ancestor of the elite who destroyed the ancestor at that time. It is the top ancestor's combat power, and the first ancestor of Qingye has not been able to fully rely on the power of the Dark Soul domain. At most, he can exert the combat power of the ordinary elite ancestors. 29 Once the first ancestor is destroyed, the first ancestor of Qingye will not survive. Quote, who let the ancestors of Qingye dare to kill and destroy a supreme ancestor of the holy clan who was about to be promoted to the ancestors, naturally angered the ancestors of destruction, the ancestors of time and space. A supreme level domain ancestor who was about to be promoted to the first ancestor of the sacred gate of all things also died in the hands of the first ancestor of Qingye. The first ancestor of everything is afraid that he will also start with the first ancestor of Qingye. The ancestor of all things is just an ordinary ancestor, and it is estimated that he is not the opponent of the ancestor of Qingye, but he will definitely start with the human race where the ancestor of Qingye is located, such as the ancestor of the human race. Maybe the ancestor of all things will take revenge to kill the ancestor of the war. It is not realistic for the ancestors of all things to kill the ancestors of the 10,000 laws. The ancestors of the war and the ancestors will not let it go, and they will definitely stop them. It may not be able to stop it. Once you enter the Dark Soul realm, many ancestors fight against each other, then the chaotic situation, any situation may happen. Time passed slowly, and it was getting closer and closer to the day when the ancestors entered the Dark Soul realm. In the past, hundreds of millions of years were just a nap time for these ancestors, but now the mere 10,000 years seems to be an incomparably long time. This day, unexpected, the Dark Soul realm shook, and someone was impacting the realm of the ancestors, and the movement was extremely huge, which was many times larger than that of the ancestors of Qingye who broke through. Who is attacking the ancestor? The ancestors were shocked. At this critical juncture, someone suddenly attacked the ancestor realm in the Dark Soul realm, which is too strange. It is the ancestor of the human race, no need to guess, the Dark Soul realm is now qualified to attack the ancestor, and the person who can make such a terrifying movement must be him. An ancestor spoke up. There are still several thousand years before we can enter the Dark Soul realm. At this time, the ancestor of Wanfa will break through the realm. I am afraid that there is no way to completely enter the realm of the ancestor. Isn't he afraid that the breakthrough process will be interrupted? An ancestor asked curiously. Indeed, the Supreme Domain Ancestor has hit the Ancestor realm, and it is impossible to completely break through to the Ancestor realm without millions of years. Moreover, the general time formation can't resist the Ancestor's breath at all, and there is no way to break through in the time formation. Just a few thousand years is simply not enough. However, they ignored the existence of the Ancestors of Aoba. Boom! The Ancestor of Qingye mobilized the power of the Dark Soul domain and began to speed up the time in Yi Tian's retreat. 100 times, 1,000, 10,000, accelerating Yi Tian, a euro who was attacking the ancestor, by 10,000 times, and frantically mobilizing the energy of the Dark Soul realm to assist Yi Tian in breaking through. This cost a lot. At this moment, the energy of the ancestors of Qingye was continuously consumed, and in order to restore the energy, Yi Tian consumed and refined the massive annihilation treasures. Outside the Dark Souls, the ancestors were stunned, and they also sensed the actions of the ancestors of Qingye. It actually accelerated the time of the Dark Soul realm and fully assisted the ancestors of the Wanfa realm to break through. Isn't he afraid that the state will be unstable after thousands of years? One of the ancestors was surprised. When many ancestors were surprised, the ancestors of destruction opened his eyes and looked at the Dark Soul realm. HMPH, Wanfa Zanzu, even if the talent is evil and the foundation is deep, the big breakthrough is comparable to the elite ancestors, but Zan Wanvayu is not the first person to break through to the ancestors in the Dark Soul realm, and there is no way to use the Dark Soul realm. Therefore, the combat power is only the combat power of the general elite ancestors, so there is nothing to be afraid of. 1 inch. Destroy the ancestors' secret path. However, he underestimated Yi Tian. Yi Tian not only has an extremely deep foundation, but also has completed the second transformation of the Supreme Domain Ancestor level, and has mastered several ultimate ancestor skills. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of years have passed in the outside world, and under the acceleration of time, Yi Tian has broken through millions of years. Finally, on this day, Yi Tian completely completed the breakthrough, condensed the endless ancestor body, and stepped into the ancestor realm. Once he broke through to the realm of the ancestors, Yi Tian's strength has increased by many times, and the endless ancestor body far surpasses other ancestor bodies, which can be called the real immortality and immortality. Although there is no time to refine the large amount of annihilation treasures now, it is impossible to quickly improve the cultivation base by 687. But he has the ultimate ancestral skills after all, and once he breaks through the realm of the ancestors, he can fully exert the power of the ultimate ancestral skills, and the combat power is stronger than that of the ancestors of Qingye with the help of the Dark Soul domain. According to Yi Tian's estimation, his current strength is probably infinitely close to that of the top ancestor. And relying on the endless ancestor body, the top ancestor could not kill him. If he is given enough time, he can easily step into the top ancestor combat power. At this time, there are still thousands of years left in the outside world. Yi Tian let the cloned ancestor Qingye continue to accelerate the time in this area, and he began to frantically refine those annihilation treasures and strive to improve his cultivation. Boom boom boom, countless annihilation treasures were swallowed and refined by Yi Tian, a euro, and his cultivation level improved little by little. But cultivation, he can only practice more. Thousands of years, there is no way to improve his strength. It is not bad to increase his strength by 30%, he can only get closer to the top ancestor's combat power. But, that's enough. With 100 years left, Yi Tian controlled his clone, the ancestor of Qingye, to stop the time acceleration, and instead refined a large number of annihilated treasures to restore the state. And Yi Tian destroyed the time and space of silence, at least not let other ancestors know, waiting for the future to slowly cultivate the time and space of silence. Soon, 100 years have passed. The ancestors are about to come to the Dark Soul realm. Chapter 1476 The Great Ancestor War, Ancestral Artifacts. Boom. Somewhere in the Dark Soul domain, an ancestral realm was slowly conceived, and at the same time, the original ancestral realm was also transformed, giving birth to a large number of treasures. Yi Tian and his clone, the ancestors of Qingye, were both in the original ancestral realm, so they immediately collected the resources that were born, and these resources were even useful to the ancestors. It was here that the Dark Soul domain's resistance to the ancestor disappeared. Whoa whoa whoa, an ancestor descended to the Dark Soul realm, but they did not go to the second ancestral realm, so it would take a while for the second ancestral realm to be born, and their goal was the original ancestral realm. At this time, the primitive ancestral world is giving birth to a large number of treasures all the time. For the ancestors, snatch some treasures will make a lot of money. In an instant, the ancestors descended on the primitive ancestors. Some ancestors went looking for resources, while some ancestors found the ancestors of Qingye. The ancestor of Qingye, die for me. The ancestor of destruction took action against the ancestor Aoba. Jiazu wanted to help, but was directly stopped by another ancestor. Jizu, don't even think about helping the ancestor of Qingye. The ancestor of time and space stopped the ancestors. As for Zan ancestor, the strength is too weak to get involved at all, and he does not dare to stop the destruction ancestor, otherwise the destruction ancestor can easily kill Zan ancestor. Destroy the first ancestor, he really shot at me. Yi Tian secretly said. At this moment, the holy ancestor has the ability to organize the destruction of the first ancestor, but the holy ancestor did not stop it, but was collecting the treasures of the original ancestor. Therefore, at this moment, it is only Yi Tian himself. At this time, Yi Tian's clone Qingye ancestor's real combat power is second only to the elite ancestor's combat power. If the power of the Dark Soul realm is mobilized, it is enough to exert the top ancestor's combat power. Moreover, Yi Tian has the ultimate ancestral skill ancestral armor, the ultimate ancestral skill streamer, and the ultimate ancestral level hegemony. Moreover, Yi Tian later deduced the time ancestral skill eternal ancestral skill to the ultimate ancestral skill level. Therefore, Yi Tian is very comprehensive and has almost no weaknesses. At this time, destroying the ancestor did not underestimate Yi Tian's clone, the ancestor of Qingye. After all, he was able to be promoted to the ancestor at such a fast speed, and he was even more evil than the ancestor to a certain extent. Therefore, he had to strike with all his strength to make it possible to seriously damage Qingye, ancestor. In a short period of time, he was sure to kill the ancestor of Qingye. The holy ancestor did not make a move, and the ancestor was stopped by the ancestor of time and space, so no one could save the ancestor of Qingye. Therefore, the ancestor of destruction casts his ultimate ancestral skill, Destruction Ultimate Fist. Boom, a punch came, and he even wore an ancestor glove, which made the power of this punch reach a terrifying level. The ultimate ancestral skill of dominance. Ancestral armor's ultimate ancestral skill. The clones of the ancestors of Qingye also went all out, and mobilized the power of the Dark Soul domain to collide with the ancestors of destruction. Exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark. The terrifying shock wave swept the entire primitive ancestral realm, causing the primitive ancestral realm to begin to crack. This is the collision of the top ancestor's combat power. What? The ultimate ancestral skill. Ancestor of destruction was shocked. The attack of the ancestor of Qingye turned out to be the ultimate ancestor skill. Although the attack power is not as good as his, it is not too weak. Moreover, the ancestor of Qingye also has an ultimate defense type ancestor skill, so even if the attack is not as good as him, he will not be injured. On the contrary, he, without the ultimate ancestral skills of defense, just felt a little uncomfortable after the collision. Can't kill. Ancestor of destruction gave up. He is incapable of killing a top ancestor. If the difference in strength between the ancestors is not too large, he can't kill them at all. After all, the ancestor's life-saving ability is too strong, but it is not a defective product of the Annihilation clan. The other side, the ancestor of all things found Yi Tian's body. The human race is the biggest enemy of the holy sect of all things, because the ancestor of the human race Qingye beheaded a quasi-first ancestor of the holy sect of all things, and was killed when he was about to be promoted. Therefore, the ancestor of all things hated the human race very much. He knew that he could not kill the ancestor of Qingye, but he had hoped to kill Yi Tian. No matter how evil Yi Tian's talent is, no matter how strong his fighting power is, once he becomes the first ancestor, the battle will not reach the realm of the elite ancestor. If the common ancestor is divided into 3 grades, then Yi Tian is at the 2nd grade or the 3rd grade at most. Moreover, Yi Tian has just been promoted to the first ancestor. The realm is not stable, it is the best stage to kill. The ancestor of all things is also very clear that if Yi Tian cultivates for a period of time, his cultivation will be improved, and his strength can definitely enter the realm of the elite ancestor. However, he didn't know Yi Tian's true strength at all, because he didn't dare to imagine it. The ancestor of all dharmas, today you will surely die. The ancestor of all things appeared in front of Yi Tian, a euro, and the breath all over his body burst out. No, the ancestor of all things turned out to be the ancestor of the elite. Both Jia Zhu and Zan Zhu felt it, and they were all shocked. For a long time, the ancestors of the first thing have shown the first, and the highest level of ordinary ancestry, and the ancestors of the battle are almost the same. But now, the ancestors of all things have shown impressively the fighting power of the elite ancestors. Although they are only weaker elite ancestors, they are also much stronger than ordinary ancestors. If Zan ancestor wants to support Yi Tian, a euro, if the 2 common ancestors join forces, they may be able to compete with the ancestor of all things. Moreover, the ancestors were difficult to kill, so there was no need to worry too much. But the next scene made Zan Zhu look shocked. Wow! A golden spar suddenly turned into an enchantment and enveloped Yi Tian and the ancestor of all things. Seeing the enchantment made by this golden spar, Zan Zhu was shocked and said, "Enchantment ancestral crystal. Such things are very precious to the ancestors, and even he does not have them. Where did the ancestors of all things get the enchantment ancestor crystals?" The ancestor of all things did not have an enchantment ancestor crystal, but he obtained it from the destruction of the ancestor. When the ancestor of destruction learned that the ancestor of all things wanted to kill the ancestor of all methods, the ancestor of destruction was immediately willing to trade. Once the enchantment ancestral crystal unfolds the enchantment, it is difficult for the outside world to break it. Moreover, the enchantment ancestor crystal can suppress the opponent's strength by more than 30%. The ancestor of all methods, you can't get out now. Under the suppression of the enchantment ancestor crystal, your strength has been suppressed by 30%, and you have just become the ancestor. I am afraid that you have not obtained an ancestor artifact. But there is an ancestral artifact. The ancestor of all things took out a silver long sword, which exudes an extremely terrifying breath, which seems to be somewhat similar to the ancestor's breath. This is the ancestral artifact, which can be called the most powerful weapon in the dark forbidden area. Unless it is a weapon-type sacred artifact in the top of the sacred artifact list, it can be comparable to the ancient ancestor artifact. Ancestral artifact, the ancestor of all methods, don't collide with the ancestor artifact. This thing can cut the body of the ancestor and cause heavy damage to the body of the ancestor. Zhao's good. Zan Zhu quickly reminded, the ancestors usually do not really fight, so they rarely dispatch the ancestors. Moreover, the general ancestors have no ancestors. For example, Zan ancestor was very poor and had insufficient strength. He only had one inferior ancestral artifact, as well as several top sacred artifacts that were slightly inferior to the ancestral artifact. Among the war gates, only Jizu has the ancestral artifact, and there is only one shape. The ancestral artifact can only increase the combat power by a few %, but the ancestral artifact can cut the body of the ancestor. However, if one party is strong and holds an ancestor weapon, they can quickly kill the weaker ancestor. Zan Zhu and Jia Zhu panicked, but Yi Tian did not panic. Looking at the ancestor of all things, Yi Tian smiled. I just need an ancestor of the ancestors. I didn't expect you to send the ancestor of all things. Boom! The breath that was second only to the top ancestors permeated from Yi Tian. At this moment, many ancestors were shocked and showed disbelief. Chapter 1477 Kill the ancestor of all things. The ancestor of the elite, and the most elite ancestor, second only to the top ancestor's combat power. This is impossible, you have just broken through to the ancestor realm. The ancestor of all things was stunned. Who is not a monster genius? In the dark forbidden area, the powerhouses who can break through to the realm of the ancestors are all invincible hands swept over the same period of time, and they are the real monsters. Therefore, everyone is a monster. After everyone breaks through the ancestors, they are all ordinary ancestors. Although there are strong and weak ones, the gap is not big. But what about Yi Tian? What kind of genius is this? And once he breaks through, he has a combat power second only to the top ancestors. This is too exaggerated. Ancestor of all laws, I'm joking with you. The ancestor of all things is cowardly. What if he owns the ancestral artifact? What if the spirit formation ancestral crystal still can't beat Yi Tian? He is only a weaker level of the elite ancestor, while Yi Tian is second only to the top ancestor's combat power. The gap between the two sides is too large. The ancestor of all things, I will kill you and tell you, this is no joke. Yi Tian's killing intent was revealed, and he did not hide it at all. The ancestor of all methods, do you really want to do this? Even if I am not as strong as you, it is not that I have no power to fight. You have no ancestors. Although you can hurt me, it is difficult to destroy the body of my ancestor. It's not easy to kill me. 1. The ancestor of all things reminded. But in fact, he was still panicking, and now he was just calming down. Really, it is said that I know that ordinary ancestor attacks are indeed difficult to obliterate the ancestor's body. Only ancestors and ultimate ancestors can cause huge damage to the ancestor's body. Yi Tian said, that's right, you don't have an ancestor, and you just broke through the ancestor, and you can't have the ultimate ancestor. Although I don't know why you can have the strength of the elite ancestor, it is a bit difficult for you to kill me. For example, how about reconciliation? All the previous things are forgotten. The ancestor of all things suggested. I really don't have an ancestor, but who told you that I didn't master the ultimate ancestor? Yi Tian sneered. Boom. The ultimate ancestral skill ancestral armor is open. The ultimate ancestral skill streamer display. In an instant, Yi Tian killed the ancestor of all things. Then, Yi Tian punched the ancestor of all things with a punch, and displayed the ultimate ancestral skill domineering. For the ancestors, except for the ancestors, other weapons are garbage, far less powerful than the ancestor's body, and even the holy skills are not as powerful as the ancestor's casual punch. Therefore, if there is no ancestral ancestors and ultimate ancestral skills, the ancestors can use nothing to wear and directly kill with the flesh, which is the most powerful method. Ultimate ancestral skill. The pupils of the ancestors of all things shrank sharply, and immediately pushed the sword of the ancestors in his hands with all his strength. Boom. The ancestral ancestor sword collided with Yi Tian's Juji ancestral skill, and the ancestral sword collapsed directly, and this punch directly hit the ancestor of all things. Crack. The physical body of the ancestor of all things was blown up by a punch, but it healed in an instant. Although the ancestor of all things recalled the ancestors, his ancestors could not penetrate Yi Tian's endless ancestors. With the endless ancestor body and Juji ancestral skill ancestral armor, the strength of the ancestor of all things is not as good as Yi Tian. If he can break Yi Tian's defense with the ancestral artifact, then his strength has already reached the top ancestor's combat power. Bang bang bang, Yi Tian shot again and again, blasting the body of the ancestors of all things. Each blow annihilated 1,000th of the ancestor's body. The ancestors of all things were terrified. This shows that Yi Tian only needs 1,000 attacks to kill him. 1,000 attacks did not take long for the ancestors. Saint Ancestor, come and save me. The ancestor of all things seeks the Tao. The holy ancestor frowned and said, the ancestor of all things, forgive the ancestor of all things. 1. Yi Tian pretended not to hear and continued to attack the ancestor of all things. Seeing Yi Tian not giving himself face, Saint Ancestor was also a little annoyed and prepared to break the barrier. However, just when he shot, Yi Tian's clone, the ancestor of Qingye, shot. Boom! The ancestors of Qingye and the ancestors collided, and they were indistinguishable. Qing CJFI Yi Ancestor, you are the clone of the ancestor of all methods. Saint Ancestor said. The other ancestors were not surprised, just because Yi Tian had just performed the same ultimate ancestral technique as the ancestor of Qingye. There is no way to teach the ultimate ancestral skill, so they can only create it themselves. If the two of them created the same ultimate ancestral skill, they naturally don't believe it. Therefore, there is only one possibility, that is, the ancestor of Qingye is Yi Tian's clone. It is rumored that Yi Tian's clone is special, just like his main body, it doesn't matter how he dies. But now, this clone can still become the ancestor without affecting the main body, which is terrible. That's right, the ancestor of Qingye said. One day he started, and this matter could not be concealed, but when it was full, no one could threaten him. Really, the ancestors secretly said, as expected of the ancestor of all methods, I used to think that the human race was really evil and could give birth to two terrifying geniuses, but now I know that they are the same person. The ancestor of all methods, you put your clone into the Dark Soul realm, this is not in line with the rules. Saint Ancestor Road, It's not in line with the rules. You have yourself and you also put your clones into the Dark Soul realm at that time. Yi Tian sarcastically. Many ancestors are anxious, but they can't do it. The ancestor of all things can't die. He is the ancestor of our dark sanctuary. Once he falls, our dark sanctuary's strength will be greatly reduced. Saint Ancestor said quickly. If an ancestor dies, I will train a few more ancestors for the dark sanctuary. Yi Tian sneered. Are you really disrespecting me? The holy ancestor said angrily. Yi Tian continued. Saint Ancestor, are you really going to be my enemy? My clone can exert the top ancestor's combat power, and my main body will really reach the top ancestor's combat power soon, even if I leave the Dark Soul domain as also the top ancestor. You want to fight against me for the sake of a weak elite ancestor? Saint Ancestor's expression changed. Only then did he understand that Yi Tian was not the weak ancestors before, but an existence that was truly equal to him. The ancestor of all things is not his subordinate, so it is not worth offending Yi Tian for the ancestor of all things. Wow, the ancestor of all things retreated, obviously not wanting to offend Yi Tian. Holy ancestor, the ancestor of all things despaired. Finally, the 1000th attack came. Boom, Yi Tian bombarded the body of the ancestor of all things with all his strength. In an instant, the body of the ancestor of the ancestors of all things was completely wiped out, leaving only an ordinary corpse floating there. When the ancestor of all things died, the enchantment dissipated. Yi Tian made a move, and the long sword of the ancestors fell into Yi Tian's hands. Then, the corpse of the ancestor of all things was also collected by Yi Tian, a euro, which means that all the treasures on his body belong to Yi Tian. Chapter 1478 China and #039, S Ancestral World. The ancestor of all things is dead. The other ancestors were far from expecting this. When the ancestors of all things took out the spirit formation ancestor crystal in the ancestors, they thought that Yi Tian, a euro, the newly promoted ancestor, would fall. However, they were wrong, and it was the ancestor of all things that fell. Ancestor, how long has it been since, have one fallen? There are far more than 1 or 2 ancestors who fell in the dark forbidden area, and even more than 2 digits, but it has been a long time since the last ancestor who fell, so this time an ancestor fell, which shocked them. In particular, several new ancestors realized that the ancestors would also fall. For a time, everyone was afraid of Yi Tian. The top-level elite ancestors of the main body can definitely be promoted to the top ancestors soon, and the clone has the top ancestor's combat power in the Dark Soul domain. How terrible is such an ancestor, even more terrible than the destruction of the ancestor and the holy ancestor. Woohoo! Zan ancestor and Jia ancestor appeared next to Yi Tian, a euro, and all of a sudden, the Zan sect was equivalent to having 4 ancestors, and possessed the top ancestral ancestor combat power, surpassing the Dark Sacred Sect all of a sudden, and can be called the first sacred sect of the Dark Sacred Domain. Certainly, War Sect currently does not have the top ancestor's combat power in the outside world. After all, the combat power of the cloned Aoba ancestor in the outside world is not as good as that of the main body, so it needs to be low-key for the time being. If Yi Tian's body breaks through to the top ancestor's combat power, and then duplicates a body, it is equal to 2 top ancestors, plus a clone that can exert the top ancestor's combat power in the Dark Soul domain, which is equivalent to 3 top ancestors' battle force. At that time, Zanman would have greater confidence, and the human race would have greater confidence. Right now, Yi Tian can't directly contend against so many ancestors, otherwise so many ancestors join forces, they are not opponents. Therefore, Yi Tian did not stop these ancestors looking for resources in the primitive ancestral world. The other ancestors left one by one, looking for resources. Yi Tian didn't waste time either, looking for resources at an extremely fast speed. The ancestor of Qingye also mobilized the power of the Dark Soul realm to search for the resources of the original ancestor realm. Perhaps because of the fall of an ancestor, the ancestors did not continue to fight, unless they encountered more precious resources, they only fought occasionally, but it was over soon. In the next hundreds of millions of years, the Dark Soul realm was in a stage of resource explosion, and a large number of ancestors poured into the Dark Soul realm to snatch resources and fight. And the ancestors did not do it. This is the rule of the ancestors, and they are not allowed to interfere in the affairs of the ancestors of the upper-level domain. Although the human race is powerful now, it cannot compete with all the forces in the entire Dark Forbidden area, so it can only give up most of its territory and concentrate on areas with rich resources. Gradually, the territory of the Dark Soul realm became clear. Almost every faction occupied a huge territory, and even the powerhouses of the Dark Destruction domain occupied enough territory. As for the local forces in the Dark Soul realm, it is relatively miserable, so there is no ancestor, and the status is too low. Many forces have been destroyed or annexed by other forces. Once the years go by, these local forces cease to exist, and gradually merge into those forces in the Dark Soul domain and the Dark Destruction domain. In fact, the Dark Soul realm was already under the control of the human race, and there were not many local forces. Now, after doing this, the local forces will naturally be destroyed. It can be said that the Dark Soul realm has completely become the domain of the Dark Soul realm, Dark Destruction and Eternal Sect. They do not have the luck of the Dark Holy Land and can control their own Dark Holy Land by themselves. Time passed slowly, and 300 million years passed in a blink of an eye. At this time, the resource explosion stage of the Dark Soul realm is over, and more resources may be born in the future, but it is almost impossible for resources to be born in such a concentrated manner as it is now. In addition, the primitive ancestral realm was also blocked. After all, the previous battle had injured the primitive ancestral realm, and the primitive ancestral realm of a dark sanctuary must be well preserved so that more good resources can be obtained in the future. If it is not blocked, the damage to the primitive ancestral realm will be too great, and the operation of the primitive ancestral realm will be affected in the future, making it difficult to give birth to precious treasures. More importantly, no force can completely occupy the primitive ancestral realm, and this is the real reason. At this time, in addition to the original ancestral realm, the second ancestral realm was born. According to the birth rules of the Dark Holy Land, every other realm year, an ancestral realm will be born in the Dark Soul realm, and a total of 10 ancestral realms can be born. Of course, these 10 ancestral realms do not include the original ancestral realm. A for flower Sayuro. For the sake of the ancestral world, the first ancestors began to discuss. The meeting begins. Yi Tian demanded. Our human race occupies an ancestral realm. Why? Ancestor of Destruction said angrily. The other ancestors also disagreed. Just relying on my clone to take charge of part of the authority of the Dark Soul realm, I can play the top ancestor's combat power, and I will be promoted to the top ancestor. Yi Tian's body showed an aura that was stronger than the aura 300 million years ago. In the past 300 million years, Yi Tian has also been secretly refining the silent treasures. Although he has not practiced for a long time, he can't stand him using time to speed up the cultivation of large formations, so he has refined a large number of silent treasures, and his strength is about to cross the threshold. Enter the top ancestor combat power. 0. At most 100 million years, the ancestors of all methods will inevitably be promoted to the top ancestors. Destroy the ancestors and the holy ancestors are afraid. But they can't kill Yi Tian. A because Yi Tian is very close to the top ancestor's combat power, and has a defense-type ultimate ancestor skill. Such an ancestor is too difficult to kill. In addition, Yi Tian also has a clone of the top ancestor's combat power, which cannot be killed. Agree. Destroy the ancestors and discuss with the holy ancestors, and decide to give the people an ancestral realm. But the human race is not allowed to compete for the next ancestral realm quota. However, there are still 9 ancestral realms left, so many forces are definitely not enough to divide, and then there will inevitably be several forces in charge of an ancestral realm at the same time, using the ancestral realm as a public world. Next, Yi Tian refined the world and changed its name to Huasha Ancestral World. The human race originated in China, so using this name can be regarded as nostalgic for China on the earth. Afterwards, a large number of powerful people from the human race entered the Chinese ancestral realm, and countless human races moved here. An ancestral world is extremely huge, and it can accommodate a lot of people. In addition, with the Huasha ancestral world as the core, the human race branches here. Basically, almost all the human races in other areas of the Dark Soul territory were moved here, lest they be wiped out by other forces. Before the Xuanshu sacred realm was promoted to the ancestral realm, the Huasha ancestral realm would become the core world of the human race for a period of time in the future. Chapter 1479 The Xuanshu holy realm is finally about to be promoted. Years passed, and 10 realm years passed. At this time, the 10 ancestral realms of the Dark Soul realm were all born, and they were divided one by one. Among them, the Destruction Saint clan occupied one ancestral realm, the Dark Saint sect occupied one ancestral realm, and the Wargate occupied half of the ancestral realm. Yi Tian occupies an ancestral realm in the name of the human race, and Zonman does not have a place in this ancestral realm, so he can continue to occupy it, and other forces can't do anything if they don't agree. Therefore, Zonman snatch another half of the ancestral realm. For Zonman, half of the ancestral realm is enough, and there is no need for more. The major forces have occupied some territory of the Dark Soul realm, causing the Dark Soul realm to gradually calm down. At the very least, the ancestors retreated one by one, absorbing and refining the resources obtained from the primitive ancestral realm and the ancestral realm. Perhaps after a long period of time, their strength can be improved again by 703. For example, some ordinary ancestors who are very close to the elite ancestors may be able to break the shackles and be promoted to the elite ancestors, and top elite ancestors like Jizu may also hope to break the shackles and be promoted to the top ancestors' combat power. Of course, this possibility is relatively low. But Yi Tian has used the 10 years of the realm to refine countless treasures of annihilation, and has already broken through to the top ancestors' combat power. This is the ontology breakthrough, so it is the real breakthrough. Even in any place in the dark forbidden area, you can exert the top ancestors' combat power, not afraid of destroying the ancestor and the holy ancestor. Dark Soul realm is finally calm, Yi Tian muttered. In the past 10 years, the Dark Soul realm has been very chaotic. Only the area of Euro the human race is very calm, but the fighting in other places has hardly stopped. Today, the Dark Soul realm is much better, almost equivalent to the situation in the Dark Soul realm. Partial fights are unavoidable, but the whole is calm. Moreover, the Dark Soul realm also imitated the practice of the Dark Sanctuary, built a large number of giant cities, and used the giant cities to manage countless practitioners. But this is not the case in the area under the leadership of the Dark Destruction domain. They are madly transforming, and they have cultivated a large number of races to kill each other, just like raising a GU. After all, many races in the Dark Destruction domain grew up through slaughter and destruction, but when they reached the level of the strongest domain ancestor, the invincible domain ancestor, the supreme domain ancestor, and the first ancestor, they were almost the same as the practitioners, only improving through cultivation. Strength. Destruction can hardly improve much strength. The 3,000 evil clans plus the destruction of the Holy Clan are just ordinary clansmen who have absorbed the power of destruction by destroying realms and powerful worlds to improve their cultivation. Because of the cultivation of GU in an area destroyed by darkness, with the recovery speed of the Dark Soul domain and the birth speed of resources, it is possible to cultivate a large number of domain ancestors and the powerhouse above the strongest domain ancestor. This is also the goal of the ancestors of the Dark Destruction domain to occupy the Dark Soul domain. In fact, they also want to occupy the Dark Sanctuary, but the Dark Sanctuary has now become a monolith, and the ancestor of destruction cannot invade the Dark Sanctuary, only occasionally launch an invasion war, raise GU through killing, sacrifice most of the domain ancestors, and focus on cultivating the strong above the strong domain ancestors. The ancestors of the Dark Sanctuary also knew the cultivation way of the Dark Destruction domain, so they did not interfere. After all, the ancestors of the Dark Sanctuary could also sharpen themselves by fighting. Yi Tian doesn't care about the area occupied by the Dark Destruction domain, the other party has also blocked that area, and it will not affect other areas for the time being, that's enough. The main body has been promoted to the top ancestors' combat power, and then you can return to the Xuanshu Holy Realm and upgrade the Xuanshu Holy Realm to the Ancestral Realm. Yi Tian decided. As for Xiao Yu and others, they still remain in the ancestors of China. Xiao Yu and others have been comprehending the first ancestor law. With their aptitude for understanding, it will take about 100 years of the realm to fully integrate the first ancestor law and be promoted to the first ancestor. This speed is not slow. After all, other supreme domain ancestors have obtained the ancestor law, and it will take at least several hundred years before they can hope to break through. The ancestral method that Xiao Yu and others fused with is still the top ancestral ancestor method, and it is more difficult to integrate, so it is very good to have such a speed. Wow! Yi Tian left the Huaxia ancestral world and was perceived by the incarnations of other ancestors, but they didn't care. With a single thought, Yi Tian crossed a long distance, traveled through time and space, and came to the Xuanshu Holy Realm. If there is no help from the ancestors of the Supreme Domain, if you want to fly, it will take tens of millions of years to fly to the Xuanshu Holy Realm at the fastest, which is so exaggerated because the distance is really too long. If it is the speed of the invincible ancestors, I am afraid that they will fly to endless years, and they will not be able to cross such a long distance. Therefore, in the dark forbidden area, except for the ancestors, other supreme ancestors could not cross too long distances. The Dark Soul realm is relatively close to the Dark Destruction realm, but the Dark Soul realm is too far away. The birth of the Dark Holy Land is random, so no one knows where it will be born. Maybe one day a dark holy land will be born not far from the dark soul realm, which is also possible. Mysterious holy realm. Yi Tian came back and immediately copied his own body. In this way, the Xuanxu sacred realm will have two top ancestors in battle. Once the Xuanxu sacred realm is promoted to the Xuanxu ancestral realm, even if the destruction ancestor and the sacred ancestor come, he can block them and prevent them from exploring the Xuanxu ancestral realm. Let the Xuanxu holy realm be promoted. Yi Tian no longer suppressed the origin of the Xuanxu holy realm, and under the impetus of the creation Hunyuanjing, the Xuanxu holy realm finally began to advance. Boom! The volume of the Xuanxu holy realm began to skyrocket, doubling with every breath. The endless territory was born, and this scene completely shocked the race. As a result, one after another of the supreme domain ancestors asked about the situation. Lord Ancestor of 10,000 Laws, what happened to Xuanxu holy realm? In the face of these domain ancestors' inquiries, Yi Tian answered uniformly, Xuanxu sacred realm is going to be promoted to Xuanxu ancestor realm. What? Xuanxu holy realm is going to be promoted to Xuanxu ancestral realm? So, our human race will have two ancestral realms. The countless domain ancestors of the human race were shocked by 5.8, and they were immediately ecstatic. Once the Xuanxu holy realm is born into the ancestral realm, how many rare resources will be born? Perhaps there will be more supreme ancestors of the human race, and the strength of the human race will skyrocket. And the large number of invincible domain ancestors knew this information, and they were even more excited, and they also hoped to be promoted to the supreme level domain ancestor. Boom! The Xuanxu sacred realm is constantly colliding, and in the case of the Xuanxu sacred realm, it can evolve into the ancestral realm in millions of years. At the same time, the entire Daoshan area has also been affected by the promotion of the Xuanxu holy realm, and it has also begun to change. This time, the Daoshan realm will not be as large as the Dark Holy Land, but it is at least equivalent to a small Dark Holy Land. Chapter 1480 Scare away the ancestors of destruction. Xuanxu sacred realm was promoted to Xuanxu ancestral realm, and this matter could not be concealed at all. Although the Xuanxu holy realm is completely closed and only controlled by the human race, there can be a large number of forces outside the Xuanxu holy realm, and even the power branch of the Dark Sanctuary. Therefore, the Xuanxu holy realm was promoted to the ancestral realm, and these forces were naturally the first to know and immediately notify those forces in the Dark Sanctuary. Even if Yi Tian kills these forces with a single thought, he can indeed ensure that the news will not be leaked, and he can even block the Daoshan boundary, preventing people from entering and leaving. But this does not cure the symptoms. Those power branches are destroyed, and the Dark Sanctuary will definitely send people to investigate, and it will still be exposed at that time. Therefore, Yi Tian didn't care. Expose it, let it be exposed. He has now been promoted to the top ancestor's combat power, and naturally he is not afraid of other ancestors, not even the two top ancestors of the ancestors and the ancestors of destruction. Dark Holy Door. At this time, the holy ancestor was cultivating when he suddenly received a piece of information. The Xuanxu holy realm was promoted to the ancestral realm. The holy ancestor was shocked. In the past, he didn't even know what Xuanxu sacred realm was, because 29 didn't pay attention. But now, he knows the origin of the Xuanxu holy realm, which is the place where the human race originated and where the ancestors of all methods were born. It is said that the Xuanxu holy realm was just an ordinary small universe at the beginning, and then it was promoted step by step, and then it was promoted to the holy realm. It is not difficult to advance to the holy world. He can cultivate a world to be promoted to the holy world, just pay some precious treasures. Can be promoted to the ancestral world. How is this possible? He couldn't do it at all, and neither could the other ancestors. If he could cultivate the ancestral world, he would have cultivated it long ago. A Dark Holy Land can only give birth to one primitive ancestral realm and 10 major ancestral realms, which is a limitation. Instead of the Dark Holy Land, the ancestral realm cannot be born at all. For example, the headquarters of the Eternal Church is actually only a treasure in the Dark Forbidden area, but it is not the ancestral realm. The Daoshan realm is just a realm. How could an ancestral realm be born? This is not normal. If this situation can be replicated, even if it takes a little longer, the Dark Sacred Sect will cultivate ancestral realms. What is the concept? Once he controls the resources of the ancestral realms, he can go further. Wow! Saint Ancestor crossed a long distance in one step and came to the outside of the Xuanxu Holy Realm. At the same time, the other ancestors also came one by one, and even the first ancestor of the destruction of the Dark Destruction domain got the news for the first time, and also came here. It really is the ancestral world. Destroying the ancestors was shocked. At this moment, Yi Tian walked out from the Xuanxu ancestral realm. Several ancestors, what are you doing here? Yi Tian asked. Ancestor of all laws, your Daoshan realm is just a realm, why was the ancestral realm born, and it is an ancestral realm promoted from the holy realm? I have never heard that the holy realm can be promoted to the ancestral realm. The holy ancestor asked. I don't know, it's suddenly promoted, and I'm surprised too. Yi Tian pretended to be confused. Let's go in and see how. Destruction ancestor suggested. Boom, a strong murderous intent permeated from Yi Tian's body. Everyone, Xuanxu holy realm is the origin of our human race, and naturally no one is allowed to enter. Otherwise, if our human race has any secrets, wouldn't it not be able to stop you from exploring, which force does not have a little secret, so your proposal, I reject. Besides, even if the Xuanxu holy realm is promoted to the Xuanxu ancestral realm, there is really any secret, that is also a matter of our human race, what does it have to do with you? Yi Tian said coldly. The ancestor of destruction said with a gloomy face. The ancestor of all methods, the holy world can be promoted to the ancestral world, this matter has a great impact, we must know the reason, if you have a way to promote the holy world to the ancestral world, please also ask this method. Sell €1 it to us, or you will offend all the ancestors. It's just you, Yi Tian disdainfully. The holy ancestor said. The ancestor of all methods, let's hand over the method of cultivating the ancestral realm, otherwise, the top ancestors of me and the first ancestor of destruction, you can't stop it. This is not the Dark Soul realm, if it is in the Dark Soul realm, you and you the avatar of Qingye ancestors joined forces, which is equivalent to 2 top ancestors, but here, your Qingye ancestor avatar can only play the elite ancestor's combat power. Can't beat us. When the holy ancestor ends, to deal with Yi Tian is equivalent to uniting with the destruction ancestor. At this time, even if the Jizu and Zanzu of Zanmen help, there is no way to compete with so many ancestors. Yes, Yi Tian sneered. Boom, another ancestor appeared, standing beside Yi Tian. This ancestor is naturally Yi Tian's duplicate body, and the combat power is exactly the same. This a euro. Destroying the ancestors and the holy ancestors looked at their bodies and was stunned. They knew that Yi Tian had a special clone, but they thought that there was only one clone, that is, the ancestor of Qingye. But I didn't expect another clone to appear, and it was still the top ancestor's combat power. It is said that Yi Tian's clone died in battle and can continue to condense. This is equivalent to having a top ancestor clone that cannot fall. How to fight this? Immediately, some ancestors were extremely jealous and left immediately, so as not to be affected and killed. At this moment, a figure appeared, it was Jia Zhu. 703. Boom. Jia Zhu is filled with the breath of the top ancestor, although it is very weak, it is just promoted, and that is also the top ancestor. Obviously, Jia ancestor gained too much benefit from the Dark Soul realm, thus breaking the shackles and being promoted to the top ancestor's combat power. Today, the Forbidden Realm of Darkness has given birth to 4 real top ancestors. The ancestor of all methods, the ancestor of the world, the ancestor of destruction, the ancestor. Among them, Yi Tian alone can be regarded as 2 real top ancestors, plus Jizu, the side of the war gate is equivalent to 3 top ancestors. If it is not the first ancestor of Qingye, the top ancestors can't play in the outside world. That's even scarier. Holy ancestor, destroy the first ancestor, if you want to deal with the ancestors of our war sect, let's fight. Jizu said. 3 on 2. Moreover, one of the opponent's 3 top ancestors was not afraid of death, so he couldn't win. Immediately, the holy ancestor said, ha ha ha, I'm just joking. Obviously, the holy ancestor does not want to offend Zanmen. After all, his dark holy gate is in the dark holy domain. If he offends today's Zanmen, the days of the Dark Holy Gate will not be easy. Destroying the ancestors also encouraged, if Yi Tian and the others encourage the ancestors to counterattack to besiege him, maybe there is hope to keep him. As a result, the ancestor of destruction also left immediately.